see it is you've got two choices. You can either keep pretending like nothing bad's ever gonna happen to you, and then when it does, you're saying, uh-oh, or you can get ahead of what's coming so that when it does, not if, you're ready for it. And you're sitting pretty, sipping on Mai Tais next to the pool, working on that Caribbean suntan, because you got it covered. So folks, it's time for you to learn the truth about money. It's time for you to take back control of your money so that you are ready for what's about to happen. By doing that, you're setting yourself up for absolute success. No matter what comes your way, you're ready for it. And that's what I want for you, and I want to help you with that. So go to chrisnoggle.com and sign up for the Wealth webinar. We do them every Wednesday at 1 p.m., and you need to be there because it's time.
For over 90 years, we've been crash testing our cars in the tireless pursuit of automotive safety. At Volvo, safety's been first since 1927. We've saved millions of lives with the invention of the three-point seatbelt in 1959. At Volvo, we've made driving safer for you and them. Visit safety.finleyvolvo.com to learn more.
So they say if you give a man a gun, he'll rob a bank. But if you give a man a bank, he'll rob everybody. The good news for you is Private Money Club runs solely on peer-to-peer relationships, which means no banks allowed. So finally, there's a community for real estate entrepreneurs where it is truly a win-win solution. This community is a place where you can connect with other lenders and other borrowers, and the end result's massive growth for you. You get to build your real estate empire, and you get to do it solving other people's problems. So if that sounds like a place you want to be, well then join us. Go to privatemoneyclub.com/Kelly. And if you want $500 off, just add the code Kelly500 and I'll knock $500 off the Premier membership. We'll see you on the inside.
Welcome to the Kelly Cardenas podcast, where attitude is everything. I tell you, for 3 years, I've been chasing you. I have been chasing you for 3 years, wanted to get this man on the podcast, and I want to thank every single person out there that's listening, that's been rocking with us since the very beginning, that has helped us to get in the top 1% globally, also with all our sponsors. So Finley Volvo Cars of Las Vegas, Jim DiGiulio. I always talk about it, the difference between relationship and transaction, which we're actually going to be talking about today. But he really showed me this concept, and didn't only show me it through me buying a car with him, but showed me it in his life. And it's just been an amazing, amazing inspiration. And Mr. Chris Noggle with privatemoneyclub.com and also Money School. Chris Noggle is changing generations and the way that they think about money, helping people to become their own bank. But the real reason why we're here is because the champ is in the building. The champ is here. I chased this man for, it's been 3 years. We've been rocking on the podcast, episode 277 today. And for 277 episodes, I've been walking by this guy in the park. I've been walking with my dog. His dog looks just like mine. And I've been like, yo, I want to have you on the podcast. And I've been after him. The reason why is because he was the head coach of my son's flag football team. I saw the way that he interacted with the kids. I saw the way that he interacted in the neighborhood. I saw his pickleball skills. You don't even want to play on the court with this dude. And also, too, we got a chance to be able to play some pool. It was about a year ago. We were at or maybe a little less than a year ago. We were at a campsite, and all the kids were there. Our kids play on the same team, and we got to play some pool. And when we started talking, it blew my mind, because this guy is in the highest level of, like, I asked, do you still do sales? He said, yes, I love that at the highest level. He's the chief commercial officer of Amaze Insights. But when I talked to him about sales, he lit up. And then we started talking, and I was like, oh, man, he's a sales guy. You're a sales guy. You're going to give me this, that, the other. But all you talked about was relationships. All you talked about was building on something, so that way when the deal came, you didn't even have to sell anything. You just said, hey, you want this? And they said yes, because you had the relationship with them. The things that you're doing now, which is a rocket ship with Amaze Insights, it's happening because 26 years of preparation, but it started in college. And it's just amazing to be able to see it. And I tell you, the congruency of this human being, guys, that you get a chance to listen to, and you're going to get a chance to be able to glean from, it inspires me every single day. And he is never putting the focus on himself. He's always pumping everyone else up, congratulating me every single time. I'm like, but you're the man doing the big things. And I absolutely love it. So please welcome to the show, the CCO of Amaze Insights. If you don't know it now, you know it, Mr. Nick Horgan.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Actually, I'm just reading my favorite author right now as we speak, The 6 Indicators for Business and Life by Kelly Cardenas. So I appreciate the kind words, but the truth is I had to watch all 276 previous episodes just so I could stack up, because my kids have been telling me for years, oh, you actually know the real Kelly Cardenas that we're hearing all about? But Dad, he's famous. I was like, he is famous. His face is everywhere. I almost grew out dreadlocks just for this, but I knew I couldn't pull it off nearly as well as you, Kelly. So I'll just have to stick with my book and then hold it up like that to do what I can. So.
Well, our first interaction was actually at the pool. So both of our kids were playing in the pool, and we happened to, we were throwing the football. You're a phenomenal dad, by the way, incredible husband too, and to be able to see your family. But we were playing, and we, our kids started splashing off, doing their thing, and then you and I started talking, and you started telling me about this hospitality side, and I was like, wow, and you were just so humble about it. But you play at some of the top levels. I mean, when I said sales, Nick is responsible for, he conservatively said $160 million worth of software and SaaS sales. You said conservatively, but when we were talking before the podcast, it's over $200 million of SaaS and software that you've sold in your career.
That is correct. And I had a lot of fun doing it. And really I was surrounded by fantastic people and fantastic customers. And truly it started relatively slowly. So at the beginning, my very first sale, I still remember it really, really well, because I was still in college and I was an intern, and I was supposed to be an accounting intern, but then I look over and the sales team is throwing footballs back and forth, and I was like, that seems like a better fit. And they're like, well, we don't really do interns on the sales team, but I talked my way into it. So I guess that was the first sale. And then while I was doing my internship, one of the sales reps left. So they had an open territory. So I went and knocked on the VP of sales door, and I said, can I work this territory? And he's like, well, you're really an intern, so go back and keep making the telemarketing calls. But then I just kept asking and saying, I'd love to do this. I would just give me a shot. He did. I was on a program as an intern where at the end of the summer I would get $1,000 bonus if everything went well, which at the time $1,000 was all the money in the world that would take me right through the school year happily. So I was incredibly excited about that. And the maybe $8 an hour, $14 an hour, I can't remember what it was, but it was somewhere in that range. But I did wind up getting to handle that territory for the final 2 months of the summer. And I said, well, what if a deal happens? And he's like, there's not one that's going to happen because it's a long sales cycle and there's nothing in the pipeline. So that I was like, what happens if something does? And he said, we'll figure it out when it happens. So then it goes on, and I do wind up getting a $35,000 deal, which at the time there's about a 10% commission rate at the time on the software. So I walked into the office and I said, Jim, his name's Jim Kenny, still in the industry, great guy. He's a leader in the space. And I said, Jim, what happens if I close a deal? He's like, did you? And I was like, I just want to know what happens. He's like, did you? And he's looking at me, and I ripped out my back pocket where I had the fax contract, and I literally slammed it on top of his desk. And I said, I just want to know what happens. So he celebrated it with me, and it was a big rush. And he's like, honestly, I don't know what happens because this is not precedented. Like, we don't really know what we're going to do. So it was a week before I was leaving to go back to school, and I go back and I was like, what are we going to do? And he says, we've decided we're going to pay you your bonus. So I was like, that's great. I'm happy with that because that's going to be like, take me through. And then he pauses for a second, looks over at me, and he says, and we're going to pay you the commission on that. So that, it basically hooked me right off the bat on that part, because that was a lot. But the bigger thing was just the people I was working with. I fell in love with the process and doing it and going through. So as I then came back, I was an inside sales rep after I had graduated from college, still with the same company. And I had my manager, and we went through, and 6 months into the year, we were failing pretty miserably. So it's 6 months in, we have a quota of $1 million, and we have sold something like $9,000 into the year. So everyone else is about 400,000, 500,000. So they're pacing like that. And they had a board up on the area that you'd look at, and you saw everyone else's little cars that were moving along, and ours is just chilling in the parking lot, just waiting. So the two of us, we got into it a little bit just coming through because he was far more experienced than I am. And he said, we're doing all the right steps. We're following this. We're making the calls. We're going through. The deals will come. But I was like, well, they're not coming fast enough. Like, look at our car. It's stuck. But he was patient and went through. But we had done something called the Grid for Managerial Effectiveness. It was right when I started. It was a 70-hour in a 4-day time frame program where you went through and you learn a lot about yourself and like what's important to you and different styles. And so the optimal style is 9-9, which is the highest concern for productivity, the highest concern for people. Then you have the 1-1s of the world that they don't care about people or productivity, so not necessarily who you want on the team. And then you've got like the 5-5s that are like, you know what, people are important, productivity is important, but I have a golf game, so I'm going to do this. Where I wanted to be a 9-9, but I'll admit, like, there were points where I would revert to productivity, maybe a little more over people and coming through. And so I was saying to him, like, I am not comfortable with this. And he did a good job of kind of backing me out. And I was like, I think you're not going out enough and meeting with the customers. And he's like, I think you shouldn't complain as much about me. And I was like, you know what, you're right. And I respect that. And I got the feedback and went through, and the two of us had a very tough meeting where we did that. But we came to an agreement. We said, you know what, we're in this together. Like, I'm a young, right out of college kid. I think I know everything. I know basically nothing. He has a lot of experience. I had the hunger. We were able to team that together. And we finished the year as the number 2 team at 146% of quota. So the second half of the year, we drastically outperformed every other team and delivered. So not enough to be actually in first place, which I really struggled with that because I wanted to be at the top. And then I did get promoted to an outside sales role after that. And I really I loved every minute of it. I really did, and I still do. So understanding people and going out and different companies and what to do, I just really enjoyed going out there and solving problems. And we had really a great product, which helped. But the big thing was I just loved being out in front of the customer. And then there's a lot of other stories where I learned just along the way how to do things better. So another fun example is a absolutely phenomenal CEO of mine by the name of Sean O'Neill, which hopefully he'd be okay with me sharing that part because it's going to be an embarrassing story about me, not about him. We had a meeting with one of the largest casino companies in Las Vegas. So I won't say the name of the company, but a very big deal that you would know the name of. And this CEO had just started literally probably 2 weeks before. So I had not met him in person yet. But my style at that time was I had an inside salesperson who set 1 million meetings for me, and I didn't do any research on any of them. I literally would show up in the room and I would figure out who I'm meeting with when I was like this looking across from them. And I did it all day, every day. And I would do 10 or 15 meetings in a day. And then I would have all the notes and follow up, and I would do all those steps. So once I was in the room, I would do all the work and go through. So I did my homework, but not on who I would be meeting with. So on this particular day, the CEO who had just joined, he sits down with me and he starts asking me questions. And he's like, so who are we meeting with? And I was like, I don't know. He's like, what do you mean you don't know who we're meeting with? What's the agenda? We don't have an agenda. And he's looking at me like, and he literally said, we need to cancel this meeting. We're not ready for it. Can you call them? Can you call them now and cancel it? And I was like, I can't call them because I don't know who we're meeting with. Like, I just know it's in this building, the big casino, this is one of the biggest casinos in Las Vegas is being built at the time. Uh-huh. And we're there at the site of where it's being built. And
what year is this?
I'm not going to say the year because then you can wrap through, but it's one of those. And I will say, the person we were meeting with had his Ferrari Enzo parked in the lobby of the old hotel that they were tearing down to build the new one. So someone in the industry can probably put together. But I'm still, I'm honoring and not saying. So we were meeting with that person who was in the room as far as that, and the CEO who I worked with many years after that, and is truly one of the most exceptional people you could ever meet. Like, he truly is. He's genuine, man of ultimate integrity, and just phenomenal, and was pretty much potentially going to be the end of my career right as it was kind of taking off, because I certainly was not prepared in his mind. And by the time he was done talking to me, in my own mind as well, because I had massive confidence just in general. I just did, like, going through, and I was like, oh no, we've got this. And then I was like, he's right. I'm not ready for this. What are we going to do? And then it just so happened that when we walked into the room, everything was set up almost perfectly, where every single question that was asked in the meeting happened to be the very next slide I had in the deck. So as the questions are being asked, I would say, Kelly, that's a great question, and then pull up and have a slide that would have the detail and the graphics behind what they asked. And we came essentially to an agreement in the room on this. We were in a very competitive situation. And then the CEO of this major casino company said, so why are we even meeting with the other company? It seems like this meets all the boxes. And then my main sponsor of that deal said, well, I guess we're done. And we were, and wound up winning that deal that led to many others. But I learned a really valuable lesson then. And I can tell you, anytime I had a meeting with my CEO after that, he had a typed agenda with every single person that was going to be in the room, as well as everyone else. And I also realized that that was a much better way to be doing this anyway. So I realized that the work you do before the meeting is as important as it is after. And people that are going to overjudge this story, you do have to realize the time we were in when this was happening was very different, because you didn't Google it because there was no Google. It hadn't been invented yet, so you couldn't Google the Google. So literally all the meetings were set just on the phone, hammering and going through there. So the type of research you can do about people now is drastically different. So now when I go into a meeting, I go through on this, or if I'm going to be with the famous Kelly Cardenas, I have to read every book he has out there, which also help you to grow a business. And it took a lot of time because 276 podcasts. So what I did is I had 5 or 6 of them playing at the same time. So I go through and say, hold on, wait. Kelly Cardenas, now he's talking to a Super Bowl champion, and now he's coming across as far as that. So, and then it's Mike Yagley, another giant of the Carlsbad community, who I learned on the Kelly Cardenas podcast. I've known Mike Yagley literally for years.
Yeah.
He's an awesome guy. I love him. I knew he was at Puma Golf. I knew all about that. Little did I know he was also, I did know he had done something with Boeing, just because I had heard that in passing. Then I am listening to the Kelly Cardenas podcast, and I find out he had something to do with the Patriot missile and all of this. And you realize, and I knew Mike was a very smart guy, just because it comes across, right? Like, he's a great guy.
Genius.
He's smart, genius, no question about it. And just a person you really like, right? And then you realize it's like, hold on, while I was out here, slinging software, going through that, Kelly's cutting hair, he's designing the Patriot missile as far as that. So this is a lot of it.
So take me to this, though, because it takes a lot of confidence to walk into that. Now, for all the people that are listening, please don't go into your next meeting and be like, hey, I'm going to wing it. Because when I say this, Nick, I want to take us back to college, though, because you going into that meeting, you had constantly prepared yourself through different areas, and very few people are congruent in their life. But when I heard this story in college and how you were building things through your fraternity, I was like, that's exactly when I heard that story. That was probably 5 or 6 years after we talked the first time in the pool.
Sure.
I was so blown away by what you were doing when you told me at the pool. I was like, man, this guy is amazing. So to put it in perspective, Nick helped to be able to build a company from $5 million and sold it for $500 million. That company sold for $500 million. Am I correct?
And that was just so it's crystal clear. I was a salesperson at the company. So I was the top performer on a very strong team, and there were a lot of people, and I was not one of the more senior people just as far as when I started, but at the end, that is right, 500 million. And the way I look at it, it's really though the friendships and the relationships that were created, that's the real treasure. Yeah. And you know what, the 500 million is nice too.
The 500 million is kind of cool though too. But when we talked about that, I was like, wow, I mean, this is amazing, because most people being able to be a part of something like that is massive, but also you're the top sales in that realm. But then when you told me a year ago about college and how you created parties in fraternities, I was like, oh, I get it. Can you break down the parties? We won't go through all the details. We'll spare Marcy of that and the Carlsbad community.
She would appreciate that. We'll keep it at a very high level. And remember, this was in the mid 90s, so in the environment, and we had a lot of fun, but it was just creating situations where everyone had fun. And that was the part I looked at. So I was the rush chairman. So I spent time.
Are you going to give a shout out to your fraternity or what?
I will.
You're probably not going to?
I'm probably not going, just because the different things, like I just try and be careful. We'll just say it was one of the major ones at Indiana at the time. And we'll say, you know what, I'll give the shout out and say it was the Indiana Gamma chapter of one of the major national fraternities. Okay. So we'll leave it at that.
Okay. You are so diplomatic.
I just
try. You're
you
amazing.
Try and catch me, get me in trouble.
You're amazing, man.
So I'll go through. But what I learned was, so first I was rush chairman, and that was I wanted to bring in the right people into the fraternity. That part was very real in that. And it was people I wanted to hang out with. And then we had a $30,000 per semester budget for social, which sounds like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money, especially for college kids that are ones planning and going through it. But the previous semesters before I was social chairman, we would have maybe one party a month. And because you would spend a lot of money and you would have beverages for everyone and all the different things, and
fruit punch,
band.
Prime.
Fruit punch.
Would they have Prime?
They didn't have Prime.
They didn't have Prime.
I'm sure we would have loved it if they had. But so what I realized is the bands we were booking, because I would spend the time and talk to them, I realized that it's not like they were rolling in it, like they were good bands going through there, and you would pay them, I think it was $1,500 for them to do an event. And I realized that if I were willing to give them more than the $1,500 and give it to them up front. So for instance, if I said, what if I were to give you $3,000, I'll give you the entire $3,000 today, would you play 3 shows? So it would have been $4,500, but would you do that for $3,000? And they'd say, yeah, well, you're going to pay it now. Like, you'll give us the money now and trust that we'll come back and show up. And they all said yes. They were willing to do that. And they all came back. We didn't have a single one that took the money and didn't show up and fulfill that. And we didn't have contract. Like, there probably was a contract, but it was not one like the ones I go through now. It was on that. And then I went to the local punch store, I guess you'd call it. So, and I talked to the
this was at the youth group. The youth group.
There you go. Right.
The youth group where you got punch. And
so I added up everything we were spending, and we were going to all the different places, and you were only allowed to buy 7 or 7.5 at a time, just because that's a rule. But everyone did the same thing. Where you
7.5 what?
Cases of punch.
Of punch.
So we were buying thousands of those cases. So I realized I had all the receipts because we kept them and we kept records. And I saw we were going to all the different places and doing it. So I went to each of the managers, and I just walked in cold and said to the managers, like, this is what we spent last semester. I would like to only come to you. And most of them were like, we're going to sell it anyone. Someone's going to come in here. And then one of them said, yeah, I'd love you to give all business. I'll take off $2 off each case if you only shop with me, and we'll make like cool signage for you. And I'll also add in these other things. And I was like, okay, that's great. I love that. And then we also went out to the other fraternities in the area and realized if we partnered together and we had good relationships with the really good sororities, which it was free for them. We realized, okay, you guys come. But then we went to some of the other fraternities, and they had a good budget too, but they weren't having a lot of luck with that. So, and then I was very upfront with them. I'd say, this is the band we have. Would you like to do this event for you? But my ask is going to be, you're going to pay for a bigger part of this event. And all of them said, we'll give it a shot. But what they were worried about was fights are coming through. So I actually brought the entire chapter together and sat everyone down and said, this is our vision. This is our plan. We don't want to be known as the people that are fighting, because who wins in that? Nobody. And if we're going to partner with this other fraternity, your job is to make sure every single one of them has an exceptional time, just has a fantastic time, has fun. They're guests here. And I don't care if it's not someone you necessarily see eye to eye with or not. Like, we're trying to build something on this. So we were able to make sure each of those groups basically had their favorite party they had, and it went really well. So like, as far as coming across, and we were able to go, instead of 1 or 2 parties a month, we were able to essentially have one every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, like pretty much right through. So like it was a lot of fun as far as going through. And then you realize the skills as part of that were making people feel good. And at Amaze Insights, as we're building this company, we realized, and it's not from the business side, it feels good to make people feel good about themselves. So although we're building a data and analytics company, and our product is just absolutely phenomenal, and it is, that part is true, but what we're really building is a community of some of the best people in the hospitality industry, because we know those people already. And then there's another person that's helping us, so similar to college, where there's these conferences called BITAC, and Rich Viola is the CEO. And as I was looking for places to invest and go through, Rich helped me in looking at different companies and coming through. And he said, anything you need, I'm here for. Like, basically, he was there as a partner even before. So I pitched him the idea of doing the Amaze Insights Awards. And it was really just a kernel of an idea. And he's like, you know what? I'm in. Let's do it. He's like, I'm going to put my trust in you that we'll pull this off. And I had originally been pitching it to do it in 2024 or further out. He had a conference coming out in 4 months, and he's like, let's do it in 4 months. So I was nervous, but I said, okay, let's do it. And we decided to add some fun components. So out here in this area, there's a Tom Cruise impersonator. I hired him to come and do the event and come through. And my CEO, who's also absolutely phenomenal, Jamie Job, she's like, I don't get it. Like, why would someone want to have their picture taken with someone who, because he looks like Tom Cruise? But I knew people would want to, because my amazing wife, Marcy, her 40th birthday, I surprised her with the same impersonator. And every single one of her friends had an absolute great time, and he just had the right personality. And that's where I look at, really from you, Kelly, is creating the right vibe, the right environment for success. And that's what I tried to do, is kind of bring the Kelly Cardenas to the BITAC event and make sure people had a great time and launch our Amaze Insights Awards. And one of our award winners is Mary Grace McCaffrey, who's just really a phenomenal person. She works with developmentally disabled people and just does so much for the community and our industry. And right at the beginning, I'm standing there with my CEO, Jamie, who's awesome, and she sees the Tom Cruise impersonator and laughs. And I had not planted this with Mary Grace. Mary Grace is like, oh my gosh, I've got to go. I need my picture taken with Tom Cruise, and runs over. So Jamie looks at me, smiles, and says, all right, I'm sorry, you got it. So what the good news is, for our 2024 Amaze Insights Awards, she gave me carte blanche to do something fun and creative. Now I'm just going to need you, Kelly Cardenas, as my vibe consultant to figure out what I'm going to do February 4th to the 6th. At the Ritz-Carlton, Sarasota, when we do the next Amaze Insights Awards.
Well, I want to talk about this too, because I think it's so important, the way in which, because a lot of people will look at and say, I have the resources to do something. Other people who go to levels don't look at the resources, they look at the resourcefulness that they have. And sure. When you did the resourcefulness thing in college, and then when I asked you about the Amaze Awards, it wasn't that you went out and created this whole convention on your own. You went to a relationship that you had built over years, and then connected with them. And so can you talk about the camaraderie and the connection point and collaboration as opposed to just trying to do it on your own?
That's a really good point. And it almost happened without thinking about it, where I was just sharing with one of my friends, Rich, this is what I want to do. And I did know that that was a potential spot, but really I was looking for advice because he had done so many successful conventions. He does 15 to 20 conventions every single year, and everyone has a great time at these and business is created. So I was just like, how do I do that? And that's where he's like, we do it together. And this is how, and help. So it is those relationships that were created really over a long period of time naturally create some opportunities which have greatly helped me. And the other part is I just love talking to people. So when you talk to people and find out different things about those people, opportunities wind up coming up. So when we found Amaze Insights, the chairman that I'm working with, who will save his name for a later Kelly Cardenas podcast episode, but a phenomenal person in the industry who has built an incredibly successful company. He and I wanted to do something together. And so we had that relationship that had been built over time. And then my brother Lee, he actually suggested that we go and look at Jamie Job Consulting because she's one of the most respected names in the entire hospitality industry. And his idea was go out there, buy Jamie Job Consulting, and then have her create a reporting platform because that's one of the biggest challenges that's facing our industry. And my brother, he's a big player and really does know the space well. And he also mentioned another name, Mike Kenny, who's one of the most brilliant people that worked with us at Newmarket and then Amadeus. And so he did not realize, and I did not realize, that Jamie Job and Mike Kenny had been partnering for 2 years before we showed up. And they had actually built literally the exact platform that we wanted and that we wanted to build and create because we knew the industry needed it. They had spent the last 2 years with one of the major players in hospitality and built out exactly what we were looking for. So Jamie Job, shared with me, well, would you like to see, at the time it was called Amaze with 2 A's, so different name, but same product. And I saw it and was blown away. So I told the person who's now our executive chairman, I was like, you've got to see this. So we had looked at probably 100 companies before this, and for some of them we really liked, but they were out of our price range. Some of them we didn't really like, and then others were maybes that were like that we could probably find a way to do this. And then when I saw this, I was like, you need to get on a Zoom literally right now and see this. And he saw it and he was like, I love the people. He's like, is this a real issue? Is this something that people are concerned with? And I had been doing it for 25 years. So I was like, yes, this is a huge issue. So he and I then set up 5 meetings with some of the biggest players in the industry. And we said, as part of it, which is the truth, is this is probably not a fit for you, but we just want the feedback. So 5 out of 5 of them looked at it and they said, not only do we think this is applicable, like this is something we need for our business. So we realized that we should be putting our money where our mouth is, and worked through with Mike and Jamie and came to an agreement. And we had a plan when we looked at this where, because their launch partner, they were already in about 350 hotels. We said, if we can add another 150 hotels in 2023, then we're really on to something and we can make this into something very viable.
Tell them how many though now. So let's hold on. I want to get these numbers straight because you said we're in how many?
350.
350 at the time.
This is December of 2022 is when the investment was made and I have joined the company.
Yeah.
So at that time we're in 350 hotels, really one good customer and great product, great customer service by Jamie and Mike. Like they had done all the right things. We had vetted the application and it passed everything with flying colors. It really was. So the people were right, the product was right. And we looked at it and we said, we can grow this to be a successful company. We see that, and we were behind it, and we got an investor team together and said, okay, there is something here. And we did our total addressable market. We looked at this, and as part of that, we said, there's the top 15 management companies will never buy this, and the big brands will never buy this, because the assumption was they have the resources to do it themselves. So we looked at that and we said, but we could still build a great business and hit this part of the market. We missed on that, and I'll tell you how in a minute, just looking at, and we said, but if we could get it into 150 hotels, then we know we're on to something. As of just over 2 weeks ago, we had crossed 650 hotels on the platform, and now we've signed off, and we have 1,800 hotels signed up and ready to go. So
okay, so this is the reason why I love you. I'm not the only reason why, Nick, but I mean, number one, you're so humble. But number two, like, you'll throw numbers at me and then you'll just move on, like you just said, past the potatoes, right? It's like, okay, it was 350 hotels. We projected 150 more, so we'll get you for 500. And now we're talking about 1,800.
that's right.
Okay, and you just sit there normal, like you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see him, and he didn't even shift in his chair. He's like, that's right. Let me say it again. 350 was the existing. The projection was 150.
More, yeah.
150 more, so let's get to 500.
Yeah.
So now we're sitting on 1,800 of some of the top accounts in the nation and around the world. And it blows my mind, and I want to talk about this because you and I were discussing it a little bit. When you grow at that rate, how can you get yourself prepared for that type of growth? Because this type of growth a lot of times kills companies.
And so we are very fortunate in the team has massive experience in the industry and understanding, and then the group that invested in this company had scaled and built companies. So without sharing exactly who those investors are, but we'll just do some rough numbers. So the team had sold a company for 50 million, 500 million, and $1 billion. So those are the people that saw something in this and went through.
Can you say that again slow? Because this is, again, like the difference between advice and counsel. One of my friends, Greg Reed, he said a lot of people seek advice, which is that you seek the opinion of people who have never done it.
Yeah.
Then they're seeking counsel, which is someone who's done it, and you're getting their insight on it already happening.
So that's exactly right. And this team, because they had learned lessons in
Say the
growth
numbers
and
again, Nick.
50 million, 500 million, $1 billion.
And when we are speaking of those in context, those are companies that did what when you're talking 50 million, 500 million, 100 billion, they sold for that much.
Sold for that. So there was an exit for a group of people in those. One of those was not in our industry. Two are in our exact industry. So they had done this in the hospitality technology space. So they understood what to come through on a market. And then I have another really good friend, Michael Carpenter, who he's been kind of my right-hand man running shotgun on a lot of deals. And he, like, I was looking at what to do next, like, he was very helpful. And I was just trying to go with my background. And I don't like to say, like, I'm getting more comfortable with the numbers, because once I put it down on paper, and he said, the only thing he would say is if he was a reference for me in a company is a lot of people will say that they could do $100 million deal. And then there's a group of people who have actually done it, which I have. So I have done one deal that was 100 million before. So, like, everything you learn in going through that, and it's interesting the lessons you learn as part of that. And then also seeing the growth of the company I was a part of and all of the different ways it comes through. And then the companies that I have friends that have also done and been really successful. So I learned lessons through them and sought advice from the people who have done this. And what they shared was, these are the pitfalls. This is what you need to do. And this is part of when we really did take this fully to market. We had done all of the testing and details to be able to say, not just, oh, we think we can pull this off, we think we can do this. This is how we'll do it. And we were actually able to take people's real data and then show it back to them to say, this is what Amaze Insights brings to the table. So this is your data in the environment with all the visualizations and everything else. Because this is one of the things that's interesting about this. Business intelligence, everyone thinks they already have it, and they do have a plan and a program, and then they see what we've built and they say, okay, well, we don't have that. So we have this over here, or we have Excel spreadsheets, which, not to badmouth Excel. Excel is a great program, but it's not how you should be running your business. Because if you think about hospitality executives, they're a lot of brilliant people. They are, and they're really, really good at what they do. But some of the really exceptional ones, they don't want to be doing a pivot table in Excel and like running it through. They want to know, am I doing better than I was doing in years previous? And how am I going to finish out this year? And that's where our tool just pops exactly that.
So what challenge, I mean, like people always talk about, and you even talked about it in sales, you weren't selling anything. You were just solving somebody's challenge and servicing them at a high level, right? And so to the person that, you know, maybe hasn't heard of Amaze Insights, which after this, everyone, you need to understand it, and especially in the hospitality industry. I mean, I'm so excited for what it is that you're doing. If you were to explain it to Maddox at 11 years old,
sure,
what would be the challenge that Amaze Insights solves?
That's a great way to put it. And so what I would say is making the complex simple is what we do. So we would take something that's really, really hard. And if I were talking to Maddox, I would probably put it into football terms. And I would say, Maddox, instead of me saying, run a slant and cut it at this, although Maddox would know exactly what I was talking about on that, what I would say to Maddox is, if not everyone knows what a slant is, do you think it would be helpful for those people to have a picture of that on their wrist that they can look down to and say, okay, I go out this far and then I cut and I go that way? It makes it easier, right?
Yeah.
Well, and that's what Amaze Insights does, is we take extremely complex calculations and data from all sorts of different sources, and we tell you, this is what's happening, so then you can make a better decision on what you should do next. So it's a view into your own business to really understand what's happening at a much, much deeper level.
So when I read the book, How the Mighty Fall by Jim Collins, it's not a book that was really popular. Good to Great was phenomenal. It was a red book, and a red cover stood out. How the Mighty Fall, I don't know if you ever saw it, but it was actually a black book, and it was a lot smaller. It was about that size. And I was inspired by that book for the size, and I actually went off that size. In that book, it listed off, I think it was 5 or 6 things that every single company that was mighty from good to great, they fell, and they all had the exact same characteristics. So one of which was hubris. And I didn't know actually what the word meant. I had to go look it up.
I believe that, Kelly, because you're a very humble man who's done amazing things. So I like that.
So I was looking at it, and I saw it, and I was like, oh my gosh. And you went through, and it was a pattern for every company that got to those levels and then they dropped off. Every single one of them had the exact same traits, and you saw it. And so I was reading it when we were on the way up, like with our company as we were on the way up. And I was starting to become aware of these things. One of which was hubris, just thinking that something's going to succeed because you succeeded before. Sure. Ego, right? Your ego gets into it. So when you're flying and moving at the speed of light like you are, 350 was the existing, 150 on top of that was the projection to 500. We're now at 1,800, but Nick's not done. Nick is on a mission, like you're on a mission, and Amaze Insights on a mission, and you guys are at this trajectory. What are some of the things that a company, if they want to move at that type of speed, what are some of the indicators that they could look at that they're going to come in contact with?
You bring it up perfectly, and where I will come back, and really your book is helpful, so coming on that, but thinking on that, but the biggest thing that I would say is hiring the right people for attitude as opposed to skill set. Now, if you can hire someone with a fantastic attitude and the entire skill set, then that's who you obviously want to hire. But if you gave me the choice of someone that had a relatively limited but trainable skill set, but a fantastic attitude, or if you told me there was someone that had the whole skill set, the whole toolbox of what we needed, but a really bad attitude, I'm not going to hire the person with the bad attitude, even if they have the phenomenal skill set, because what it does is it poisons the organization. Where if you think about, if you have the right team in place, you can train the different items, and it's much easier to train a skill than it is an attitude. So that's where I think what I have so much respect for you is the positive attitude and what you bring to the table. And then I noticed when you were coaching football, when someone drops a ball, it's not, why didn't you drop that ball? It's go build them up, build that person up. And to me, that is why I love spending time with you, because I look at things in that same way, is how can we help make people better and be a positive influence and leave situations better than they were when we came into it. Because to me, that's so important, and that's what we're building as a company. And our investor team, our board, senior leadership team, and who we're bringing, we're all built in this very similar way of we want to do something great for the industry. We want to make the industry better and better for the people, and that's the key of it. And the success that is going to come as part of that, like, that's a byproduct, but not the goal. Like, it really is, how do we make people happier in their jobs and have fun with what they're doing and just bring truly joy into it? Because that's the part where I think falling in love with your current circumstances, like a really famous podcaster I've heard say that, and I really do believe in it. And like, I was catching up with one of my friends on the way into the school today and talking about, well, what would you do if you won the lottery? And it's like, you know what? We already have. Let's look at it with that mentality of, we're living in a great time and a great place around great people. So we have that. Now, would it be nice to throw a Lambo in it with it? Sure, it would. And I'm willing to try that part out to go through, and great. But I really am truly happy, and I'm really enjoying what I'm doing. And I was fortunate enough to have that for 25 years with really a great company, that we are doing something now that is additive to what I spent the first part of my career building. So I love that part of it too, where it would be not nearly as much fun as if, let's just say, I had a competitive product that went against what I used to build and sell, then I had to poke holes in that. Like, that wouldn't fit me and my persona, where if I could look at, you know, all those benefits I talked about before, you're still getting those, but now you can also do this on top of it. And that's what I really love about this, is the ability to do the right thing for the people that I had worked with all these years. And there just are so many phenomenal people that are in this space, and I've had a lot of fun doing it, and I'm still having just a ton of fun doing it.
How does a person get out of, if they're in the sales process right now, or they're maybe in that, which I believe every single person is selling, no matter what, no matter what you're doing. I mean, some people are like, well, you're not in sell, you're using the, you know, you're doing the podcast. I'm still selling the podcast. Like the podcast, you got to listen to it. And we talk about like the personal branding, all those things. How does a person go from the mentality of selling that sometimes this has this persona on it into the relationship space that you talk about? Because you told me a story about one time, and you just used it as an example. We were playing pool, and you were blowing my mind the whole time. It was unbelievable. And you said that a lot of times you'll have, you know, you take somebody to a Padres game, and because you have already developed the relationship with them, if you have a new product, take them to the Padres game. You guys are having a beer, having a hot dog, or having some fruit punch, and you just turn to them and be like, oh, I got this. If you want it, it's cool. If not, that blew my mind, because most people are like, no, I got a 17-point PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to pull them away from the game, and then I'm going to go into mode. And you know when a person goes into mode. How can a person go from the selling into relationships? Because that's pretty much the holy grail, I think, in business, if you can get there.
I think the key is take a step back and just get to know the person. So who you're spending time with, and enjoy that, and understand what are the challenges that they're facing. And if what you have isn't the right fit for those specific challenges they're having, then there's someone else that probably is having those challenges to go through. So it's truly care and position and understand. So if you are able to seek to understand before you seek to be understood, it goes a very long way. And it's genuine, and people understand that. And at the top tier of the sellers, it's true across the board. Like the other people I know that have had massive success, it is very similar, where they're not really pushing the product or going through. They're taking the time to really understand what is going on, and each person's KPIs, what's important to that specific person. And then a lot of times you'll wind up finding the solution just as part of it. It's almost a byproduct of that, where you're not just pushing and saying, I have this thing and it's great. And the other part I've seen a lot of is greener salespeople. As soon as someone says, I have this challenge, they immediately want to shove the product in and say, oh, well, I can solve that, and this is how. Where I like to take the time to say, oh, is anyone else affected by that challenge you have? Because this is happening to you. Or are there any other downstream impacts? And what are some of the other things that happen? So if you take the time to understand, and I don't necessarily even come right back with the product, but then if 3 weeks down the road and you are able to then come back and say, oh, you know what? I was talking to my buddy Kelly Cardenas, and he said XYZ. Have you thought about this? And then it becomes a lot more natural, and it's counterintuitive, but the bigger the deals get, the more you can do it at that level, and the more people are involved. So when you're talking about a $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 deal, one person can usually make that decision and go through. When you're talking about a $5, $10, $15, $20 million project, there are very few people. There are some, like Kelly Cardenas on the Kelly Cardenas podcast, can make that decision as long as Brooklyn says, green light, go ahead. But in a large organization, there's very few people, even if they can, that are going to make that decision. So it's understanding all the different components. And the other part is it's usually a prioritization game. So what other priorities are they looking at? Because a lot of times people think, I sell this product, I'm competing with all the other people that sell this product. No, you're competing with the guy that sells carpet and the woman that sells anything else into the organization for those priorities. And you're also competing with doing nothing, because that's the easiest thing to do, is not make X investment. So it's once you understand that part of it, I think it simplifies the game pretty substantially.
Let's talk about the preparation, because this is something that is massive, where when you were talking about you guys' growth as far as Amaze Insights, you guys were looking 5-10 years down the line before you even launched. And you had that counsel. So let's break it into a couple of buckets.
Sure.
What were some of the counsel that the $50 million exit gave you? Like the practical application and saying, like, you need to be looking out for this. What was that?
So the biggest thing on that was understanding how to scale responsibly. So not go out there, because you, at the time we were looking, you could go out and raise a ton of money and just kind of burn through it. It is be very, very tactical in how you plan for the growth that can come, so you can take that on, so that you're able to basically any money you take on, you're encumbered by it. So because then you have to get a return against that in the different parts. So if you are able to start on from a lower point, what you're able to do is actually sometimes a lot more. So you have to be a little more creative in the spend and coming across, but that was part of the counsel. And it was also the same part of bringing in the right people. So the people that have the skill set, but again, it goes back to attitude. So it is the right part. And then the 500 million part, he was like all about the taxes, making sure you're paying the exact right taxes and collecting this. Because if you're not doing it right when you're smaller, it becomes almost impossible once you become large. So like figuring out all the different places you do business and what that's going to bring on, and then also being very smart about where you focus your resources for the growth at the beginning. So really we're starting with, these are the right type of accounts. So it's not just going for growth as far as the number. You want to partner with the companies who are really good to work with. And that is what we've done. We have been very specific in who we've even pitched this to, because we want to ensure that we have the right partners that are going to give us the feedback that makes this much better in 18 months than it is today. And
where do you get the patience though? Because that takes the patience, and it takes a belief, and it takes a faith and a foundation and a hope. Because a lot of times when people do a startup, or they already have a leeway, but they're going to scale, they're looking at like, I think this stuff in the heart that you're talking about is amazing, but man, we need money now. But then they end up hurting themselves in the long run. How can a company, if they're at that point, like, how could you encourage them to maybe stiff arm this investor or this venture capital, because it's ultimately going to control their company when they're trying to tell you, but Nick, it's a lot of money that's coming in.
And I think that part is, and there are a lot of really good private equity and venture capital firms out there. There really are some exceptional ones who are going to help you scale your business and grow your business, but you really have to understand and do the research on, because they are different. And are they going to be the right partner to take you to scale? Or is it also something that you can do bootstrap to bring together? So if the two of us were going to do a venture and we did it on that, it would be a lot cleaner if we were able to do it without other people's money. Because once you bring that into the equation, then you do have a responsibility to that side. And if you say we could do this in 6 months and they say, well, we need it in 3 months, if it's not realistic to deliver against that, then you're creating a pretty significant challenge for yourself.
So at the $1 billion level, when the company, what's the advice from the $1 billion company?
So
taxes was here in the middle at the 500 million. That was a large one in the allocation, and making sure that we understand the type of partnerships. The first one was to get, don't take money from just anyone. Make sure that you're doing a right partner. What was the third? What was that $1 billion?
Interestingly, all about creativity. So I think on that, and that is someone who did creatively scale to that business on that. And so especially at the early stages, and that one was a startup.
Hold on, $100 billion exit, and they were talking to you about creativity?
Not 100 billion. Sorry.
No, $1 billion. $1 billion. $1 billion. I said 100 billion. Wow, I should do this. I should have a cat. I should have a cat with me too, stroking the cat. I've got the chair, so I can move around that way. So the $1 billion company, they sold for $1 billion, and they came to you and talked to you about creativity?
That's how that business was scaled, especially at the beginning. Creative solution and true and belief in going through. And this is where we have a strong female CEO, which I think now is more important than ever. I really do. I think it's actually the first time in my career that I have worked for a female CEO, just because that's the way it happened. Yeah. And honestly, it's been phenomenal. And Jamie has the vision and the perspective and the experience in the industry to do this and go through. And and it could also be personality, but on this, it is a different mentality, and it has already helped us in a lot of different ways, where she's taking the time to listen to everyone on the senior leadership team and not just say, we're doing this because of that.
Outside of the listening, that listening part, which is a massive one, what is and not to demonize, we're not going to demonize the guys that are out there doing it, but I mean, it is a different perspective. For me, being in the professional beauty industry for 30 years, when people talk to me about connecting with women, it wasn't anything new to me, because 75-80% of my industry was women, and then probably 95% of the women who were sitting in my chair were women.
Right.
So I was privy to that part, but what has been the major differences for you? You said that the listening part is massive. What else have you seen?
Well, and it is, especially right now in this environment, it is good when we do panels at trade shows and that, because there was without getting into specifics, there was a pretty major hospitality trade show, and they did a panel on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And they had this panel, and it was set up, and they had 5 older white males as the panel. And no one caught and said, maybe we should rethink this. And BITAC that I mentioned before, I created a panel for that, and it was natural, but we were aware where we did have multiple races, multiple genders on there as part of the panel. And I do think it's important to be cognizant of it, where it helps right now being a company that was, so 2 founders, one was a male, one was a female, that it helps with both of the perspective and that. And I think now more than ever, it is important to have those voices in the room at the table and really help to make sure that happens. And I think of it for my daughters. Like I am excited for that part, to have a company say, that's my boss, that's the CEO, and she's brilliant, she's good, she does all the things that need to happen to help us scale. So like, to me, that's a very positive thing.
Nick, you're probably one of the most competitive people that I've ever met, but you do it low key.
Wait, one of the most?
Okay, there we go. So, but as the kids would say right now, low key, like you're low key competitive, right? And then I gotta put this in for my daughter, dead ass. Like, I had no idea what this meant, and then I said it, and she was like, "Why are you saying that?" But it just means seriously.
I'm familiar with that.
I didn't know this, but I said it to her the other day. We were at Daybreak. We're sitting there, and Pastor Jason, who's amazing, Pastor Jason said something, and I looked at my daughter, and I was like, dead ass. And she's like, Dad, we're in church. And I said, but still, I'm cool. Like, and she's like, no, you're not cool right now. You know, you're in church.
And if Kelly Cardenas can't be cool, what does it do for the rest of us? The dad's like this, like, look at the 2 of us here. You've got the cool black T-shirt on, a chain of yourself on your neck, and I'm wearing the suit. So like that. But again, go ahead on that. So at least it's all of us. Where I was really cool with the kids younger. Now we're getting to the embarrassing state. When they're 25, we'll be cool again though.
We're getting tough on these. Where was I?
What was the point? So you're at church. She said that,
but let's go back before that. What was it? Where were we at?
Well, you were using dead ass in the sentence as far as in church. You had an epiphany while you were in church with McKenna.
Well, but I think that it's the connecting point. Well, I want to go to this part because I lost my train of thought in it, which is the awesome part of I've never been diagnosed with ADD, but I believe I have it because people would want to try and fix it. I'm joking with you. So. How are you able to manage this though, the type of growth that you have, and not go into the ego side? Because most of the time, again, the hubris, right? So it's like we had 350 when we started, like when we went after this company, we projected 150 more, so we get to 500. We're now at 1,800, and we're going, and we're not taking. And I asked you earlier, how do you pump the brakes? And you were like, I ain't pumping them. Like we're going. How do you keep your ego in check in that type of environment when you're going and you're accomplishing the things that most people only dream of?
And I think because we have so much more to do. And that's what I'm focused on. And I also know what my number one job is, to be a good father, a good husband. Like that is it. And that part, and that is my focus. And this part, it is important, but I have perspective on this isn't the end game. And like we talked about before, falling in love with your current circumstances. I don't need this to become an X dollar company or that in order to be happy, because I am happy and I am truly and fully enjoying the ride. And I also know that it's the journey, not the destination. So like that's the part of it where I'm enjoying every minute of this and the growth. And I also am fully aware that we will face some significant challenges. I don't know what they'll be, but I know they will happen. So that keeps your head kind of in check, knowing that like you make plans and God laughs, like that part where, so like no matter what it is you have, I know there will be pivots we need to do and changes. The fact is I have the confidence because we have the right people that even if something happens and we had to change it, I have confidence that we would be able to deliver against that. And it just comes back to by doing the right thing. And if we make mistakes, we'll own those and come forward. So actually it makes me think Sean O'Neill, the person I mentioned before, where he was so good and just doing the right thing, and where he would, if we made a mistake, just say that. So we did a big marketing campaign. This is years ago when cordless telephones were still kind of cool. So we were trying to come up with the right giveaway, and we had messed up the year before because it was after 9/11, and we gave away little Leathermans, and we gave them to people at a trade show. So we basically gave everyone a knife right before they were getting on a flight. So like that, we're like, can't do that, but we need to make sure our customers know we're listening. So we had the phones printed up. It said, we're listening on them. And they actually looked pretty good, but they were cheap. So conservative, so you're not going to spend a ton on the cordless. So we sent all these out, and the things barely worked. So like, that was the joke as far as that. We're here, we're listening. So the idea was we'll give you this cordless phone. You can call us on it, but we gave you a cordless phone that didn't really work. But he listened to that part too. So Sean, if you're listening, hopefully...
don't buy people phones again, and no Leathermans, no Leathermans. I remembered what it was. I was talking about the confidence part, and I said you're one of the most confident people or competitive people, and you were like one of the most. But when I asked this, can you teach competitiveness? Or is it something that's born in you, or is it your environment around it? Because the competitive part, I believe, this is the Holy Grail. If you can have a competitive spirit, you add a humility to it, and then you add a phenomenal attitude. I don't think anyone could beat that.
I respect what you're saying and agree completely. And I think the part that is important, and this has been true the whole time, and it is not, at least for me, it just is. When I was competing to be the top sales rep, it was extremely important. It really was important to me, and I wanted to do it, and I thought about it. The key is I never didn't want success for everyone else in the organization. I wanted that 100%, and I was 100, like all the way behind it. I just wanted to sell $1 more than whoever did that. So I wanted, like, Jeff Sears was one of my best friends at the company, is still one of my best friends, is a phenomenal seller, really hard to compete with because the guy is very good at what he does. And he came in every day and just hammered the phones and went after it. And in the year that I was not the number one rep, there were 2 years. One of the years it was him.
What year was it? You remember it?
I do remember
What
it.
years?
It was 2006 and 2009.
Do you have them tattooed on you?
I should.
Because Nick, you are the most competitive.
Like those two. So one of the years,
2006, 2009.
Yeah. In 2006, I lost to Jenny Phelps, who she beat me by, we both did like 4.8 million, somewhere in that neighborhood. And she beat me by literally like $14,000. So like any one deal could have done it. And it came down to the end. When Jeff got me, he got me relatively handily. It was like, he got a pretty monster deal at the end, or I thought I was looking good and on that. And we both hit something like 250% of quota that year. But he won by a relatively good stretch, and I did celebrate him. Like I was happy for him, and I really was, but it was hard for me. And I still look back and it's like, what else could I have done?
Where does that come from, though, Nick? I mean, was it born in you? Did your parents teach you this? Where did the competitive?
Not my parents. So my parents taught me amazing lessons, like across the board. Not that part of it. My brother is also highly competitive, so maybe that's part of it. Where the two of us, we played a lot of NHL and Madden and coming back and forth. So I still have a hard time with him because Michigan versus Ohio State, we'd played an entire season, and I find like it was impossible to win the national championship against each other because we were relatively similar in skill set. And I had actually gotten all the way there with an undefeated team to the end of the season, and we're less than a touchdown out, and there's like a minute and a half in the game, and the whole time the two of us had played, you never downed the ball. You still just would run the plays, run out that. And there he is, just click, kneeing the ball down and just looking over at me. And so, Lee, I'll let it slide now on the Kelly Cardenas podcast.
So how can you foster that? Like, how can you foster it but keep, because there's the side that, and we see it here especially in North County, where a lot of times, and North County parents, I absolutely love you, but a lot of times you're living vicariously through your kids. As far as in sports, how can you foster a competitive nature but still keep the kid humble and a good sport?
I would love to have the answer to that. And so I'll tell you a quick story that I saw happen on the football field. Actually, this one I didn't see live. I was talking to another dad, and he was at one of the games, and he mentioned something that a ref had said to a kid. So he was on the field, and the son, I think the dad was coaching, the son was there and dropped a ball. So the ball comes up like that, and the dad starts screaming at the kid, and you saw like the dejected face on the kid. And this other dad told me that the ref looked over at the kid and just said, "Is that your dad who's coaching?" And the kid's like, "Yeah." And the ref looked at me, he's just like, "I'm so sorry." And that, to me, so I guess I look at it and just, that's certainly not the dad that I want to be. And I saw you when you were coaching the same way when I was coaching. I looked at it as, it's not that football game that's important. So my son and the other boys, it is, they're going to be men someday. How do we help them to be better men? Because that's what's important. And really, this one, I now, as I think about it, I do go back to my dad. And I remember he was my hockey coach, and I was a kid, and I still remember him saying, where we had lost a game and he did not have the best players on the ice at the time. And I think I was upset about it, even as a kid, where I looked at it. And his word, like we were kind of talking about at the dinner table, and like, I think my brother and I were both like, we could have won, like if we had had the best skaters on the ice. And he said, 20 years from now, no one's going to give a shit who won that hockey game, which he didn't use language like that all the time, but he did in this. So that's the quote. He said, but some kid that sat on a bench for an entire game is never going to forget it. So like realizing like what is important, and that part, like you have that perspective. And I guess that's kind of the humility side of it, is taking a step back and seeing what's important. And I do think that the youth sports here do a good job of like saying the lessons, but you don't always see it on the field. And like, I know even you and me who are here that way, we get into the games and as far as look at that. And then you do see the part is what's important is not the score of the game and that, it's how the kids feel about themselves during it. So when watching the girls' lacrosse games, which I love to watch, seeing how they feel after that, regardless of the score, is what you can control is your attitude and your effort. So the outcome of the game, the ref, everything else, you can't control those. You can control your own attitude, your own effort. And if something goes poorly on the field, which it's going to, that's part of life, your ability to come back and do it again, like that is key. And I think I go back to Rocky and like his part on it. It's not how hard you can hit, it's how hard you can get hit and get back up again. And I think there's lessons in business to that too.
Well, what do you say to the person that argues and says, well, I mean, you live in a really nice area, a really nice neighborhood. It's really easy for you to say, like, the paradigm has shifted for you, and it's like, hey, it's all about being a good dad. It's about being a good husband. I mean, you don't understand my situation, Mr. Nick. Like, I'm in a place where, like, I have to. My kids aren't going to be able to, like we were just talking about, our principal is saying, be kind and loving. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Kids are getting awards and they're doing this stuff. But what happens to how do you speak to the person that's maybe not in that environment?
And I think that part is, I am humble enough to know that I have not lived in those shoes. And I respect that everyone's journey really is different. So those challenges are unique. And so I really do feel for anyone who has that situation and going through. So
how could they shift the paradigm, like in that? Because for you and I, when I'm speaking on this, I understand that once that paradigm shifts, it's wild what you see, right? It's amazing what you see and the opportunities that are there. Like my friend the other day, big shout out to Will, and hypothetically, he gave me this conversation. He was telling me about a bunch of times in his work and throughout his career that there was a lot of people that were a lot of times wouldn't do their job, show up late, just wouldn't do their job. And what I told him, just from my dad's perspective and from my perspective in business, I said, I invite that. Like, I love when people don't do their job. And he's like, what are you talking about? I said, because if they don't do their job, I get run, meaning that I get the opportunity to solve a challenge, which means that if they didn't do it and I got to do it, means I got to do it twice. I got to do my job, I got to do their job. Now I got twice as much of experience. Now if there's 4 people in the organization that don't do it, I'm super excited because now I get 5 times the experience and no one can touch that. There's nothing that can stand in the place of actually doing it. Because you and I could talk about theory of business, right?
Sure.
And you're not a coach. This is what I love. Nick, you're not a coach of businesses that sell for 500. No, you've just done it.
Yeah.
Right? And now we're telling the story of it. So when I was telling him that, he was like, man, I never thought about it that way. Well, most likely I hadn't thought about it that way because it's just a shift in mentality. How can a person where does that start and how can they shift the paradigm wherever they're at right now?
So I think you bring up a really great point, and I look at my own life, and as far as that, whenever I'm feeling frustrated on different things, if you take a second back, a step back and think about what do you have to be grateful for and really be in the moment, like that's what I keep coming back to. And what's really interesting is as we were about to grow and scale this company, I took a step back and just wanted to I didn't get nearly to all the people I wanted to, but I really was in a very grateful place. And I just wanted to put that out there. And it was really interesting what happened when I went out on what we call my gratitude tour, just going out and thanking people. Well, first there were people like, is Nick okay? Like, did something happen? It's like, yeah, he's great. This is because the people that really knew me, they knew everything that was going on. It was like, no, he's actually super happy. So he's just kind of putting that out there. And then the people were good because it was foreign enough for people to see, like just putting out there, like I didn't want anything and I didn't. Like it was just putting that out there. The strangest thing happened though, as I was doing that and being grateful, there were all these other opportunities that literally showed up on my doorstep as part of it, including a board seat at a company that I didn't wind up doing, but it was like nice to engage in those conversations. That this is someone that did not know who I was and they were searching for someone else that I was just posting about. And then he shared with me that he then started reading all of my posts and he's like, I need to meet this guy. Like, who is this? And why is he posting about all these other people? And really I was just thanking those people. And he's like, and then I was like, I just want to meet that person. So then he wound up seeing, we had a mutual person. They're like, oh, do you know him? And then set up. But it was strange to think that, and I guess all the people that are out there and looking for what is next, I guess the advice I would give is realize what you have to be grateful for and people you are grateful to, and then just put that out there. So it's just like I said to you, like, and that is sincere. I am grateful to you and for what you do and what you bring to the community. And all those years I knew who you were because it said Kelly Cardenas out on the signs, and you were sponsoring all the school things and the concerts at the park and all those things. And I realized it truly helps the community. It does that for that. So I just have such respect for that. So that's why it took me 3 years to get on this. But, I just had to make sure that like I gave you enough time to continue out the D's. So I didn't want to slow you down, right?
Well, let's talk about this too, because when you were doing Amaze, and I remember you. Hopefully we could talk about this part of it. And I'm not talking about specific companies, but it was a chance. Like you were taking a chance. Like it wasn't like you weren't going to something that was like absolutely 100% secure in that place. You were there was a risk involved. how does a person prepare themselves for risk, and how do you know if that risk is for you?
It's a fantastic, and on this, I had a very hard decision in front of me because where there were multiple paths, and I had multiple offers for.
Are you able to, I mean, I know we can't talk about absolute specifics, but can you help the people to understand? Because when I say, here's my buddy Nick, and he's the baddest man, like for me, one of the baddest men on the planet, like in business, you're one of my biggest mentors. And then like people will be like, oh, wow, that's cool. And then I'm like, he was the top salesperson for a company that went from 5 million to 500 million. He's also got mentors that have sold for 50 million, 100 million, and $1 billion that he has direct access to. Then they start being like, oh, okay, let me listen to Nick. Because now also sold over $200 million in your career in the software and SaaS part. When I put those parts on the table, it's like people's ears perk up a little bit. Can you give them some context? I know we're not going to go specific wise because you're a humble guy. That's why God didn't bless me like that, because I'd wear a superhero suit. I'd grease myself up with some baby oil and have a fan in front of me all day being like, this is exactly what I did.
Yeah. And I think because I just look at where it happened naturally. It just did, like as far as going through, and it was part of all I was doing was being who I am. Like that part is and that's where my friend Michael Carpenter, when he was talking about it, is with the Amaze Insights Awards and recognizing these fantastic people. He said, you've always done this. Like you've always gone out to people and like want to build people up. Cause that part is true, where now I just had a platform where I could do it formally and give someone like a large crystal award that looks really nice, and then do the posts and the PR and all those other parts of it. So I guess it's hard to describe. I don't know how to teach someone else to do exactly what I did, other than to say, understand who you are as a person and be that, like be who you really are. And that will help create, because once you find the right spot, and I did, like I was in the right environment, the right company, and was able to really grow as a person and get better at what I was doing, like I said before, by making the mistakes and going in there without the agenda and everything else, and learning the lessons on this worked, this didn't work, what can we change, what can we go across, where anyone, regardless of their circumstance, if they are able to shift, because the mentality of, and terrible things happen in the world, so I don't want to just downplay that part. Mm-hmm. So it is without question on that. And I feel for anyone on that, but the scenario of how you approach different situations, and if you can come back to what are the things you have that you can be grateful for, and the people you can be grateful to, and are there ways you can help other people? So if someone's doing a job search or going through, like, I'm always more than happy to look at a resume and go through there. And if I can connect someone to someone else in my network and go through there, I feel like as long as it is the right fit, that I'm helping both that other organization and that person. So I love doing that. In fact, on my way in here, I was talking to a really good friend of mine. I won't say the name, but just a person. And they were on a bus at the time, and you're not allowed to talk. So like would text back that part and just to listen as far as go through on strategy, because there was a big interview and just wanted to make sure ready for and like that. And I truly love that, because if you can help someone get into a better situation, then it pays dividends. And then what happened over the years, I have done that. I can't even count how many times. Then when I need just to get in touch with that person, they're typically going to pick up the phone. And they also know, because I don't just call someone because I'm asking for a favor or something like that. Like I truly do want to catch up and learn and go through there. And I do sometimes ask favors too. And then people also know, like, I don't forget that, like the people that come through. So Christine Lawson, she's the chief executive officer of the city of Santa Clara. And I will never forget the kindness that she did to my family when she was the SVP of sales for Kimpton Hotels. So that phenomenal company that just does the right things across the board, like staying at their hotels is awesome. It really is. Well, my dad we didn't know at the time, but he had Alzheimer's, and we knew he was kind of starting to forget things, but they were going to San Francisco for a wedding, and I just happened to call my friend Christine and say, you know what, they'd love to stay in a Kimpton. So she put them up in an awesome room at the Sir Francis Drake, and she just made sure there were some special surprise and delights for them. And my dad kept talking about what the great staff, like how amazing they were. And during that stay, there was someone at the hotel that overheard them talking. So my mom and dad were talking, and he said, I forgot to get the Wall Street Journal. And he loved reading the Wall Street Journal. Like that was the thing. So they overheard that conversation. And the person from Kimpton, which I wish I knew who the person was, I never found out, literally went down the street, bought the Wall Street Journal, knocked on the door, and delivered it and said, oh, I heard you mention this part, so I'm dropping it off. So, and then that was just what Kimpton was as a company, and Christine embodied that in every way, like really did. Just phenomenal person. And so I'm just so grateful to her, because that was kind of the last trip my parents took together where my dad was still fully who he was. But I'll also say this, with anyone who's struggling with that, like I fully feel for, just because seeing what happened to my dad, it was so hard. Toward the very, very end, when he had a hard time walking and he didn't know who my mom was, sometimes knew who I was and sometimes didn't, he never stopped being who he was, because we're there and the man truly could not walk across the parking lot. Like I had to help him going through. And he sees a woman about his age, and he's like, she can't get across the parking lot. Like, he's like, I need to go help her. And he like went all the way out there, and then there he is, like opening the door for her and helping. And that's what I saw. It was like, he still was him. Like that was still there, like who he was as a person. So like, that was really good to see. So I realized that was like a non sequitur story, like bouncing around, but that's what you bring out, Kelly.
But it's right in line, though, because when you hear that story, it's the hospitality part. But how do you balance? I'm not a balance guy, but how do you understand when to go which way? I'm a compartmentalization guy. I don't believe in any balance. I don't believe like, I'm going to balance my kids and my wife, because then they're each going to get 50% and I'm going to fail. And I know what failing's like, because I did it in high school a lot. Grade school too, mom, dad, and middle school. So I think I had some in there too. But that's a recipe for failure, is to balance. I'm going to give 50% to my wife, 50% to my kids. You're going to fail. If I compartmentalize and say, I'm with my wife, I'm only husband right now. Awesome place to be, by the way. I'm with my kids. I'm only dad right now. Now I've got to be a great husband to my wife to show my kids, but I'm dad at that time when I'm at work. I used to get in trouble with this, because I used to say, there's only 2 phone calls I'll take. Number 1 from the president, because I knew he wasn't going to call me. Number 2 is from my mom.
Yeah. Because
I knew the only time that she would call me is when it was real.
Yeah.
So the compartmentalization, how do you turn these parts on of the gracious humility, hospitality, and the apex predator killer in you? And when you laugh, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because both of them exist. How do you know when to switch it on and switch it off? And have you made the wrong switch at times?
I mean, I think if you talk to the people, even the ones where I was doing the really large deal with a huge and I hadn't slept, I still was me as far as switching. And I think I've tried to be better at that, and I don't do it all the way. The one thing I will say is I read something, it's about the phone and like the distractedness, and I do think that is a very real problem. And then I became highly cognizant of that, because there was a point in time where I was trying to do everything. So I would be with my kids, but I'd also be responding to emails at the same time, and like while we were eating. And then I read something where if there's food present, your phone shouldn't be, which I really do like that part, where checking out, because it's very easy to be like distracted and go through there and not make the most of it. Where if you can, whether you're with your kids or business meeting, any scenario, be truly present and in the moment, what you're going to find are much better things wind up happening. So I think maybe I'm not as good as you are at the compartmentalization.
No, I'm not good at it. I'm not saying I'm good at it. I'm just saying that,
so that's what I do try to be and go through there. But I also part where even when I'm working on the really large deals or going through there, I am definitely still me. And or I will crack jokes and come through there, even when I'm in a room with some really senior executives that they are important people that are responsible for massive, massive things. And sometimes I'll be sitting down with someone who literally will have 5,000 or 10,000 people that not report directly to them, but roll up to them in the organization. And then when you start to think about the numbers that are involved there, they're staggering. And then when you go through on the time, so I think it's just the same thing where being grateful for that scenario and not being intimidated by any situation or going through there, because I will go right into it. And that part, I can't say the how, but I know even when a little kid, where my mom said, if I would be at McDonald's and I wanted more fries, I would just walk up to the counter and say, could I please have some more fries? And then they would just give them to you. Yeah, here and this. So, I mean, that part's fun. And I did so my sister and my brother are both phenomenal people. And I, as the middle child, I got both sides of it. So my brother and I are both famous in the hospitality industry, but then we have a sister who's legit famous. So she's a meteorologist in Louisville. So she can't go to the grocery store without being recognized as far as that. Cause she's on when I went to visit my mom and my sister, you turn on the TV and she's literally on there, where, I mean, I do know the real Kelly Cardenas. So, I mean, I have that part going for me, but
No, I posted on LinkedIn. I got more love on LinkedIn because I put Nick Horgan's name on there. I put your name, and people are coming out the woodwork. Nick is the man. I love you. And I was thinking, man, I'm going to add Nick to every single post that I do. I'm going to be like, yo, Nick and we're hanging out. I'm going to take a bunch of pictures throughout the neighborhood. Every time I walk my dog, I'm going to stop and just take a picture, and then I'm going to post it and be like, Nick and I are hanging out.
I like that.
So it'll be different times.
That's a good plan. I'll do the same with you. And see, I am one of the cool kids. Here I am.
How important is it having a healthy marriage when you're flying at the levels that you're flying in business? Because I remember a person telling me, I was single at the time, and I sat down with him. We went to dinner, and it was that advice that you don't ask for, that was punch you in the mouth advice.
Sure.
And he's like, you're going to be a lot more credible if you get married. And I was like, well, I mean, I'm not, what do you mean? I'm credible now. You should trust me. He's like, no, you'll be trusted at a completely different level. You'll get into different conversations. You'll get into different opportunities when you are married, because people will trust you at a different level. And I was like,
because you've made a commitment. So on that part, and I would say it is extremely important. And this is the part where Marcy, who my wife, she is a truly phenomenal person, and was truly challenged me mentally, everything else, because she's brilliant. And that's where, when I came to the realization, which I did, that she's certainly smarter than I am, that was a little hard on the ego, but I was like, okay, this, and a better writer, and then certainly a better pickleball player and everything else. I accepted it. It was like that. And I don't try and hide from it. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to be better at that than she is, or writing. So lean into it and have her help me. But it's so important. And that's what I'll say, where when I closed the biggest deal truly in my life.
When was this? What year was it?
This was 2017.
What time of the day? Because you know the time too.
Well,
You're a killer.
I'll give the exact time, because I know where I was.
It was the time when you went to dinner, right? And you were working on the thing. So you got to tell the story too.
I'll tell this. So there's two parts of the story, and I'll tell the whole of it.
Well, let's go back to Marcy, because I'm sure Marcy will like hearing about Marcy too.
So, and she again is phenomenal. And whenever I was on the road, we would always talk a lot, because I would tell her about the day, everything else. But she knew this deal I was working, which I won't say the company, but one of the biggest companies in hospitality, and it was for all of it. So the stakes were incredibly high.
All of it. How many?
Can't say the exact.
You can't say the.
So we'll say between
around about
6,000 and 8,000 hotels worldwide that this was going to be a part of. And the numbers are.
And this was one deal.
One deal
The one
that I
deal.
had been working on for.
Range of deal as far as
We'll say 4
range.
years into it. When all is said and done, like the initial paper was going to be 50 million on a multi-year, but the total valuation. Well over 100, and that doesn't go into the 100 that I said, like well past that, and then it wound up with halo effect. So like we're talking about real money, real stakes, real people in the room.
Couple $100 million, we could say.
Probably say 100 comfortably,
and then
halo like that. So call it 150 relatively safely. 100,
right, cool.
So in that range.
I love you, Nick, because most people are like, I did this, and Nick is like, roundabout. Just want it.
And there were like I had help and other people, like a lot. When it comes to a deal of that size, there are a lot of people. Like someone, I actually won't drop the name just because in case, but if I get permission, then I will. But so we'll just say
you're a superhero.
Like that was in the room on that. And we were supposed to. It's a 1-day meeting. We flew out to the city where we were going, and it was supposed to get done during the day, and we get into it on this. It's an 800-page contract, and we ran into some skids on this. So it is 8 o'clock in the morning. We were supposed to be done by 4, and then we had a really nice dinner planned for 7 p.m., kind of celebration dinner. At 11 p.m., we're still sitting in the meeting room and sweating, and like it has gotten very, very intense. And it's great people on both sides, but there were just still fundamental and real issues. So that was Monday morning. My flight out was Tuesday. I wound up canceling 3 different flights, didn't finally leave this city until Thursday night at, I think, 11 p.m. From Monday to Thursday, I had slept a total of 2 hours during this time. I had only sent like cryptic texts to Marcy just saying, still, and she knew the deal I was working on and knew how much had gone into, so she left it alone. But she, during this time, falls in love with a little puppy, like that she finds, which I had resisted a puppy for literally for years. She had wanted a dog. I had said no, and like, it's not going to happen. So the deal on Thursday, we're not done with the deal, but we're done with the meetings because we had not gotten there. Like we did everything we could. I'm in the foxhole with an attorney and also the senior executive who was awesome and just like a good support partner, was up with me all night too. So like he hadn't slept, and he had better presence of mind than I did at 4:30 in the morning when he's like, we have to be in the room again at 7. We have to go get some sleep. And I'm like, we can't, because we're not done. Like, we need to do this. And I'm 100% wrong. He's 100% right. I see that. And I am trying to keep my composure, but I'm like, and there was a deadline of Sunday night on this deal.
Okay.
Not an imaginary deadline, a very real one where the cost component of this deal, which had to go through crazy financial reviews, would have multi-million-dollar implications if we miss the deadline. So there was a very real possibility, should we miss the deadline, that the deal does not happen. Like, it is a possibility. So we're going back and forth and on that, and we're not all the way there, but I fly home, and as I'm on the plane, because then I can finally like start to decompress, Marcy's sending me pictures of this puppy, like nonstop pictures of it, because every night she was just sitting in bed, like scrolling through, and falls in love with a puppy that is, at the time, pink collar puppy, like, and so I am working the deal, but like responding to, and I walk in, literally open the door, like, not nice to see you, something else, just says, what did you decide on the puppy? Because we did make decisions together where, you know, how sometimes you count the votes, sometimes you weigh the votes. Her votes certainly weigh a little more than mine. But on the puppy, I had held strong, and I said, do whatever you want. I can't, I have been negotiating for 40, 50 hours straight, and I have had to fight like points and different, and I'm trying to get to the right place, but like I truly don't have anything left in me. So runs upstairs and locks the door. Like, not like in a mad way, but just does that. And so she's gone for maybe 10 minutes and comes out with a huge smile on her face. We're getting a puppy. So I was like, whatever. We're not going to tell the kids because they're still young. So on this, and then I'm like, maybe that's a good, but I'm not thinking about that because I'm still thinking about this deal. And so I'm then locked in my office. That's Thursday night. I'm locked in my office from Thursday night until midday Sunday, and still like going back and forth. And then I tell her, I was like, we sent it's called the packet. Like the packet is the 800-page document with the electronic signatures. As far as that, she's like, you're getting out of this house, because she's the better person and knows, like, you are done. Like, you need to get out of the house. I love P.F. Chang's, and so she takes me to dinner at P.F. Chang's with the kids. As we're walking out the door, literally like walking out of the house, I say to her, I was like, I'm just going to grab my laptop just because. Like, she's like, there's nothing you can do, which she's right. So you know the area, but for people not in this, where we live to P.F. Chang's, it's probably a 5-minute drive. I have the laptop, and I get an email from the key stakeholder on that side. The signature blocks are wrong. So the tool we were using, which is a great tool called Certify, my friend Jeff Sears now works at that company for electronic signatures. I had made the mistake. I had put the signature hard-coded where my CEO was supposed to sign and where theirs was. I had misplaced them. So I go into Certify and I swap the signature. I move it in the car as we're driving to P.F. Chang's. And 30 seconds after I send it, I get the response. And I look over at Marcia and I was like, it's done. She's like, what do you mean it's done? You mean you sent the I was like, no, it's back. Like, so after years and all of this, like, then it finally came to fruition. And that was kind of a career defining deal, just because the scale of it. I had done at that time maybe 20 or 22. So now I've done 24 deals over $1 million each. So on those deals, I went 24 for 24. Like, once a deal got to a certain point of those big deals, went all in and went, but I had never done anything on that scale. And it was not like the ones I had done were kind of close. Like, it was drastically bigger, and the stakes were far higher. And so just for all of that to come through, and I guess that part comes back to having a phenomenal wife that knew me well enough and what I needed. She unintentionally planned the perfect celebration dinner at the perfect moment where we were already in the, so like we then were in P.F. Chang's as I'm truly in shock on that one. Cause after with big deals and only people that have like worked on, you'd think it's like, you're so happy when you see it. And a lot of people see that outcome. What they don't see is how much work goes into like the huge enterprise deals. And it's hard to describe like the emotions of like, once you actually get it, you would think it's just elation on that. And there is a big part of that, but it's also like, what now? So coming through. So it's like having that person that is there for you because what I'll also tell you is, of the really big deals I worked, 100% of them went sideways quite a few times during, and that's what you have to do, is get it back on track. And I did some sales coaching for a group, and they were going to sign their first $1 million a year deal, and they told me, they're like, oh no, we're done. They said we're done, and I was like, you're not done. He's like, but how can that be? Like they said, I was like, you're in the like 4th or 5th inning of a 9-inning game right now. Like, just understand that part and don't get discouraged by it, because it's normal, it's part of it. And then started texting me like, this happened and legal and that. And I was like, yeah, that's part of it. And then they changed this. I was like, and what I said to him at the time was, I don't know what's going to happen on it, but I can tell you with certainty that something will, just because when they're that large and there's that much at stake, things change and come through. And so I guess the skill set is being able to do that, and then having a partner in your life that can manage those ups and downs as part of it and be there for you and support, and know that like when you think about a good marriage and a healthy marriage as far as that, like it's going to pivot in different times where one partner needs to be stronger or there for the other, like just depending on what's going on. And then when something really challenging happens, then both need to and kind of be there. So I guess that's the part that I'd say is playing the game and coming across, and that it's having the right person there with you, which I know you did on that, just because I know your wife, and I think we can both comfortably say you outkicked your coverage.
Oh, yeah.
She's pretty significantly out of your league. Not to say you're not a handsome guy, but as far as that, like,
no, we won the lotto, brother. We won the lotto on
and
that
me too.
one.
And I could see that. Like I could live with that part. It's like on that. So like, I can't beat her at pickleball or this or that. Like,
I know my wife is a phenomenal snowboarder. I mean, honestly, she's great at everything she touches, and everyone loves her. And like we're doing a retreat up in Utah with women, the Women's Hideout, and I got on the call the other day with all the women. They're like, "Where's Brooklyn at? Where?" I was like, "I'm here." And they're like, no, but we can't wait to spend time with Brooklyn. How do you take it? Let's go into the kid part, because how do you help the children when you were talking about, like, people will see the $100 million deal, or they'll see the company sell for $500 million. They don't see the process part of it. They, like, when you were talking about relationships, this is the thing that blew my mind, because when we were playing pool and you started talking about how you set up the fraternity parties, how you connected with the liquor stores, how you did those things, you connected with the other fraternities, you made sure that people had amazing, you connected with the bands. That's the exact way that you built, $100 million companies, right? And so when I look at that, a lot of times people look at the $100 million companies, or they look at the $1 million deals, or they look at the multi-million dollars or $1 deals, and they're like, okay, but yeah, Nick, I understand you said heart, relationship, all that stuff, whatever. Can you just tell me how to do a $100 million deal? How do you translate this to your kids? Because it's hard. The grit comes from most of the time experience and failing.
yeah.
But our kids in this environment a lot of times aren't taking the L's that we took. How do we translate it?
And Marcy and I talk about that, and we have not all the way solved it. And actually, I was reading something. I don't want to misquote the person, but I'll say who I think it was. So Candace Nelson, who's the founder of Sprinkles Cupcakes and Pizzana, she obviously is in a financial position now where she can do whatever. And someone asked her on LinkedIn, what do you do for your children? Because obviously they can give every opportunity as that. And so it is giving them chances to fail. And honestly, that's what I realize I need to be better at, is not being the bulldozer that goes in and knocks down any obstacles as far as that, because it was certainly not done for me as a child, and I know it wasn't done for you. So being better at giving them a chance to fail and learn from, and then come back as far as that. And then another thing I read in Freakonomics and looked at is, if you praise the outcome or how smart someone is, they don't do better on that. But if you praise the effort and what went into it, then they'll work harder to create the right outcomes. So I think that's the part that, where I know I'm very, very far from perfect and keeping things together, is helping to create the right situations for my kids and friends to go through there, so that they can be successful later, and then focusing on the journey more than the outcome. I guess that's the biggest lesson in it. And that's the part where I think knowing when you're in the heart of it, like that is a big part of the fun. It really is. And because the end game, like, it's going to leave you potentially unfulfilled and unsatisfied, because like the highs are never as high as you think they're going to be, and the lows can feel super, super painful. And on that, just knowing that like it will come back. So like the things that you need to do to take stock, and when you do get knocked down, like having the fortitude to then push through and get up. And I think that's where really picking the right partner in life, that's the most important decision you will make. And then if you are going to start a business or join a startup type business, I would focus less on what that product is and more on who the people are, because when you look at the stories of the ones that have done really, really well, it's not necessarily that they just happen to find that magic product and it became something. It's that group of people went out and did something exceptional. And sometimes you find it something different. So I look at you as a perfect example of, you literally have created a business based on just who you are. Like, people who see you're on your podcast and hear you, that think, oh, he's super positive because he's talking about that. Well, those of us that know you know that truly is you. That is who you are at the neighborhood, on the schoolyard, as we're cheering at the football games, and looking back to, like, one of my favorite parts when Spencer was part of the team was you taking the time with all of them to then praise someone else that's on that team. Who can you build up? Like, what can you say positive about this? And that's not going to be easy for everyone, because, like, looking through, hearing the praise and that, but it's positive and it brings something better into the world and the environment. And to me, at the end of the day, that's what's truly important. And that is with the company, what we're building, it's part of that. And that part, it has wound up having major ancillary benefits, but we weren't doing it for that reason. We were doing it because it's sincere. And that's the only way it works, is this is what's important and this is why. And how can we truly help people be better at what they're doing and come across? So if we do that, then we've been successful, regardless of what the P&L says. Now, if the P&L can also look really good and really clean, then that's going to be good for everyone. And there's no question about that. And so because that stuff is extremely important.
Of course.
It is. And doing things in the right way, it's so important. And that's the part where I look at this, where the people I'm with, it's not like we just looked at this in December and said, we should start a company together and do this. It is literally decades in the making of relationships in the industry and understanding what are the fundamental challenges that are facing our industry that we can help, and where we saw this is one where we do know what the challenges are inside and out. And then we also know the people that are facing those challenges, and we have the credibility when we say, this is what it is, this is how we're doing it. And then now we have the added benefit of, and these are the others that have looked at it and gone through and decided that, yes, this makes sense. So it is one of those things where it's really, really hard at the beginning. And that was the same time, the first time around, when we were hammering calls, we were trying to sell a computer system to hotels that did not have computers. So they like, when we would call and say, we have this product and it does this, and they're like, we don't have computers. We had to sell them on, well, yeah, you're going to have to buy, which I think at the time they were like $3,000 a pop for the computer, and something like $20,000 or $30,000, which was, it's a lot of money today. It was a heck of a lot more money in the 90s. And that was part of, like, to put this in, you had to fundamentally change the way you're doing business, where now we're not trying to do a huge shift like that. So I think that's another part that's important, where now you can build and scale a company without having to start everything from scratch and build and go through there.
Have you ever seen a company do the right things for the right reasons and it not work out?
That's a great question. And I have, and I think
was it just the timing?
Timing is has a huge role in it. And I think what we saw so there have been several points, at least in the hospitality industry, COVID was kind of backstop, where I think some companies would have failed if those backstops were not there. But after 9/11, which obviously a very challenging time for everyone, hospitality was hit very, very significantly in that. So, and I was in that environment when it was happening. I was actually at Kimpton's headquarters on 9/11, went to sign a contract that did not get signed on the day just because everything that was happening.
Of course.
2008 was very, very challenging, I think, across the board, but travel and hospitality hit really hard. There were some very good companies that maybe were kind of on the precipice of doing something big that didn't wind up having the runway to be able to do it.
Okay.
And I think right now, the macroeconomic environment, so travel and hospitality is actually in a very strong place, but I think there are some concerns about the overall macroeconomic environment, and we are very cognizant of that on our side, where we're building this in such a way that we don't need really significant resources if things should become more challenging, because I think we see that if that happens, typically you're looking at anywhere from a year to 18 months where things could be really challenging and then turn around. So I guess that would be the advice if you're building now, build in such a way that you can handle a pretty tough sledding period of maybe a year to 18 months, because I think it's realistic that we could be facing something like that. But if you're doing something and you're doing it right, I did see companies that were successful even in those tougher times. And I think what you also see is anything that was created during those points that does, like the things that make it through, they make it through even stronger. So I think that part's important too.
What are the things that you can see in the hospitality industry that the normal person, you're an expert in it, you've been in it, you understand it inside and out. What are some of the things that are coming that we don't see coming I'm not in the hospitality business.
Sure.
But there are things that, in my industry that I look at and I'm like, well, I could see that, and I see it super, super clear, and it's coming. Although, person that wasn't in the industry, they'd just be like, I'm not really aware of that. What would that be in the hospitality industry?
So that's a really good question, and I'd say the consolidation that's happened with a lot of the big brands, that has an impact on just what you see. So the more consolidation that happens, like, it changes as far as the options. So it's not necessarily bad or good, but it's just something that I think that you will see. And what I think has certainly happened is, and this is something you do see, and when you go to travel, the rates have gone up pretty significantly.
Yeah.
And that's both on airfare and hotels, which it's both good and bad for the industry as far as it coming along. And then I think that what you're also seeing is the Vrbo, which I always said VRBO, but I think it is Vrbo. So Vrbo, Airbnb, like, they've done exceptionally well as the hospitality option as far as going. And I think those companies will continue to be really successful. But I think that hotels have done a really good job of differentiating and giving you a reason to be there, which I still do. Like, there are times when traveling with a family, you want to rent a house, but there are times you want to be at an actual resort and have the service levels that are there. And I think that's one of the things that the hotel companies that do that well, service, they're going to continue to do well and be successful. Where if you think about how AI is going to have such a massive impact on so many industries, hospitality is one where it can make service better without question. But the true hospitality is person to guest coming through there. And that's where I think AI may be an enabler to help hotels provide better customer service, but it's still going to come down to that person that's actually interacting and with the guests, and that, because that's the part with everything you read on AI and everything that's happening, talking about these are all the jobs that are going to be replaced. The part that at least I personally don't see how you could replace is this right here. So could ChatGPT write two sides of a conversation on a podcast? Sure. But would it be entertaining to read, like the words we say? I personally don't think so, not to the level, because it's not going to have your personality and what you bring to the table. And that's the part where if you look at the really successful conferences and meetings that happen and how much goes from that, we lost a lot of that during the pandemic because people couldn't be face-to-face. And then so much happened on Zoom, which I do think are really valuable tools. They are, and you can see the face and come back and forth. there is still no substitute for bringing people together and then having them in an environment together, together to do things. So that's where I do think the conference business, convention business did not come all the way back yet, but it is. You're seeing that now, where leisure travel is already above the peaks of 2019. So if you look at, especially in the resort environments, it is all the way back. Now, downtown hotels that have a lot of corporate business, they're not necessarily all the way back, and it's kind of market by market. But if you look at both rate and occupancy, Las Vegas is a perfect example of a city that has never done better than it is doing right now at this point in time. And that city has done a phenomenal job of creating environments for people. So you have the Raiders there now.
Yep.
You have the women's soccer team.
The A's are coming.
The A's are coming.
Yep.
And it looks like it's possible that Bally's will partner with the A's to build a ballpark and a casino resort on the same parcel of property. So you have a 35-acre property on some of the most prime real estate, not just in Vegas, but in the world, where you have so many rooms. I think it's 35,000 rooms that are on basically four corners right there.
Yeah.
And then Bally's, which is looking like they'll partner with the A's to do 9 or 10 of the acres on that space and the rest on a resort that they'll then theme in some way. Like, that's pretty amazing. And then you've got F1 coming to Las Vegas, where you're going to have F1 cars literally racing down the strip. So that's going to be phenomenal for the city. And then you have MSG Sphere, which is a giant globe, I guess you would call it, that's right there. So another attraction. So they've found so many ways to reinvent, which is already a really cool place, which I know you had a salon there, so you know the market really, really well. We saw Taylor Swift with my son and daughters and wife, which she did an absolutely amazing show. But the biggest thing I saw is being in the city, just how much was going on and how well the city was able to handle it, where you had a NCAA basketball game the same night as Taylor Swift, and you would expect everything to be completely locked down, but it wasn't. Like, you could still get from one place to the other, and that city can handle massive events, and the big players in that space, they do it really, really well. So like when you look at people like Michael Massari from Caesars, he's the chief sales officer there. He's a brilliant person. And Stephanie Glanzer, who's the chief sales officer for MGM, she is as well. And they've both done really a huge thing for the overall travel industry with the U.S. Travel Association. They visit Washington, D.C., and they're advocating not just for Las Vegas, but for all of hospitality. So that's some of the stuff you maybe wouldn't see, is what happens behind the scenes to make a city really, really successful. And the hockey team that was brought there, like, they did all these things to make it a great place to visit. And it's not like they said, okay, we got the football team, we're done. Like, now they have the Super Bowl, and then they'll have the A's and the Golden Knights. Like, all those really amazing things are kind of what personify hospitality and a reason to go to a city. And there's a lot of other phenomenal cities as well that are doing a great job of why to come here. So you've got even Carlsbad. Carlsbad does a good job of promoting the city of Carlsbad. And then you look at the San Diego Tourism Authority and why is San Diego such a phenomenal place to be, which we finally, it looks like, have the right weather here. So, so do come visit San Diego and stay in the hotels, eat in the restaurants, because it helps all of us. And I don't think most people realize how large of a piece of the economy hospitality is, but it's something like 1 in every 20 jobs is impacted by hospitality and tourism. So it is a monster part of the economy, and it's also one that it drives a lot of fun. Like, when you go out and you travel, I think of like Conrad Hilton and his saying, what he would say is he wanted to light the world with the warmth of hospitality. And if you take some time and really think about that sentence, that's a very positive thing, right? Light the world with the warmth of hospitality. And so that is a company that still personifies that. Like when you go on there, where it's not to say you're always going to have like the perfect stay anywhere you go, but they really do care. And they'll take the feedback and they use the tools to read, like, Kelly, did you have a good stay? What could be improved? And then they take that feedback and improve. So I love seeing things like that where people want to get better and the industry becomes better and they take things in. So.
Well, I think it's incredible too, because when you're talking about the hospitality, a lot of us just think about the hotel or the resort or whatever it is, but you're looking, and this is why I love you, one of the million reasons, but you're looking at all the things that go into making that hospitality actually function. Because if it wasn't for, when you were talking about Vegas, if it wasn't for, catering around the Golden Knights when they came,
Sure.
then a lot of opportunity would be missed in that. But it's not just something that translates directly to a person staying at a resort. It's creating an experience around the whole thing and looking at the long game of the hospitality itself. And it's incredible because, and I can't wait for you to listen back to it, because it's exactly in line and congruent with every message that you've talked about today. Every single one of them. It's never been like, okay, I'm going to target this thing and only focus on this thing. It's like, no, I'm going to focus on doing the right things. And as I build the right things, maybe it'll take a little bit longer, but that's going to have a so much more of a stable foundation as you move forward. What are some of the things about hospitality that you wish you could unlearn?
Ooh, that's a fantastic question. So I think I would choose not to unlearn anything is the real answer on it, because the experiences that I've had and what I've done brought me to where I am. And so I wouldn't want to take out any component of that, because I am humble enough to understand that I don't know even close to all of it yet. So any part of it, like if I try and take out one piece of it, then you don't know what other pieces may fall as part of it. So, and I also don't know, like, some little, as my good friend Kelly Cardenas would say, what little nugget of information is out there that I can take. And that's what I took from your book and the way you wrote it as far as that. Like, what are the 6 indicators for the successful business and life? Like, looking, I just want to make sure I didn't jack up your title as far as part of that. But looking at how you look at what are those pieces that you can bring together to make the whole much larger than the sum of its parts. Absolutely. And look at that. Like, that's the part that I really love about it, is what can we do to be better? Like, every day, because you did mention I'm competitive, and I am without question.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing I'm competitive with is how can I be better today than I was yesterday? Like, how can I then reinvent myself and go through there? Like, for instance, I got your shout out on that, but I need to focus on my personal brand. When you asked me my Instagram handle, I didn't have one. So as far as that,
I would argue it, because for me, your personal brand, like, when I said anything about personal brand, and I want you to know I wasn't calling you out on it. It was more of a shout out. But as I started to think about it, I was like, what is Nick's personal brand? And I was like, honestly, like, I believe that to really, truly, this sounds crazy, but to really, truly, authentically work on a personal brand, you will never focus on it.
Yeah, that's a good.
And because I had a kid in the car yesterday, we went to Glen Ivy, and we were on the way back, and he's a young guy, and he's has a sales background, but he's a young dude. He's green, and you know he's green.
I thought you were talking about a kid, just so you know. And okay. I was trying to picture Maddox's friend, like which one it was.
That's what I call a person,
I get it,
But so this kid, he's talking to me, and he's just like, how do you build? Like, give me the components to building a personal brand. I could tell you that, if you're going to have a shirt, wear the shirt every day, because no one will believe in it before you believe in it.
Yeah.
I could tell you that you have to have an exit strategy, not a exit strategy, an X-it strategy, meaning that you put an X on the treasure. And when the X is on the treasure, you're always moving towards the treasure. I could tell you those principles, but If you focused on those principles and then you did it, you would be the same dude who I've talked about before on the podcast that has all the Ed Hardy gear, that has all the cool jangly chains and thinks that he's going to be able to talk to the good-looking women, and you're not going to be able to. I want to compliment you because your personal brand is hospitality. Like, you're not hospitality as far as an industry, hospitality as far as, like, you embody what you do. Therefore, you don't have to give the features and benefits of anything that you're doing. If Nick Horgan's doing it, I want a part of it. And every single person that does business with you is that way, right?
I appreciate that. And that part is where I did, one of the people, I won't say the name yet just because we're on as far as this, but so we landed, I'm partnering with the BITAC conference on the steering committee, and we landed a very big player in the space, and the event's at the Ritz-Carlton Sarasota, which is a phenomenal property in a phenomenal place. This particular person doesn't necessarily love Sarasota though, so he's like, there aren't many things that are going to get me to Sarasota in February, but luckily Nick Horgan's one of them. So I'm there, I'm committed, I'm in. So, and I'm truly appreciative of him for this, because this is someone who is responsible for a $500 million a year business. So like, staggering compared to any numbers I've ever touched. Like, that is his responsibility, is a business unit that does $500 million a year. And he's going to be there, and he's going to be on my panel at this conference, along with some women who are exceptional leaders in hospitality. And I am not going to share any of these names until probably 2 weeks before the conference, because that's part of the fun.
Of course.
But I'm so excited that I'm truly giddy about it, because we're creating what's going to be one of the best events in hospitality with this group. And this is a conference that did not exist a year ago. So BITAC does phenomenal events, all sorts of different ones. They do it in hospitality, and they do it for healthcare as well.
Yeah.
And I was talking to a few other key opinion leaders in the space, and we said, you know what? Their events are awesome, and they are. So they're focused on luxury, another one on operations, another one on independent hotels. But what I wanted is sales, marketing, and revenue management. Those people all in a room at once, because that's the target market. So I shared with the CEO of BITAC that, you know what, I love your events, and I do. They're great, but wouldn't it be amazing if we created a sales, marketing, and revenue management summit? And they did the research, they went through, they did all their work on their side, and they came back and they created that exact event. So I am super excited, because this is where we're going to do our next Amaze Insights awards. And it's one where a few other people in the industry and we're helping to make this a reality. And we're also helping to make sure that the right players in the space are there. And that's the goal, is to create an event that anyone that's not there is going to really wish they had been there. And we're going to create some really fun learning and items, and it's going to be a really phenomenal event. So I can't wait. And that's the other part that people don't realize, is I'm doing a lot of planning today for a conference that's happening in February of 2024. So it's a lot of work on that side. And that's what people in the hospitality industry, because you go to a big convention and they think, this is great, why didn't they do this, why didn't they do that? They don't realize how much went into getting all those people in the room, and the speakers, and the venue has to be right, and like all the different parts. And one of my favorite parts about it is they have games as part of this. And as mentioned, I am highly competitive. So they do cornhole, Jenga, and another game where you toss a ping pong ball into a bucket, and then some other different variations, darts. So we'll talk about 3 of the conferences I went to. The first 2 in a row, I did not lose a single game. So not cornhole, not darts, not anything. And I got very, very cocky. So like, I lost that humbleness as far as that. So then I talked the most trash you can imagine at the 3rd conference where I was. And I was like, oh, we are going to straight dominate, like all this, my team. Like, and I was trying to build everyone up, and probably got on the obnoxious side on what we were going to do. Went from going, there's 4 games, had gone 8-0 on that. Dropped an O. 0 for 4, including not only did so fail the team, but I personally underperformed on every single item. I'm pretty sure I'm the one that knocked over the Jenga. And on my cornhole tosses, I didn't even hit the board, which I love playing cornhole as far as going through there, and just straight missed. But the event was still awesome in the networking. But so now I'll be training with you out in Water's End, getting ready for 2024, just because I want to get ready for it.
Well, talk to me about this too, because it's a subject that came up, and I got a lot of pushback the other day. I posted something on YouTube, and I said, AI will only replace people when the vibe is off. But I just put that clip because I knew it was going to be, for me, I knew it was going to
create some
challenge some people, whatever it is. And I got a bunch of pushback on it. And I just recently went into a business that I won't name the business, but this business was at the height. Like the vibe part of it for me was like, oh my gosh, it blew my mind. It inspired me at the highest level. I just went in the other day, and I swear to you, it wasn't the amount of people that were in there. It wasn't the level of product that they were selling. Everything was exactly the same. But I could tell you this. I looked at my wife and I was like, you feel it? And she was like, yep. And then I looked at my son. I was like, you feel it? And he was like, yep. Like, the vibe was completely different. We didn't actually want to go there anymore.
And I think you're nailing, and on that, I think hospitality more than almost anywhere else, they need to be highly cognizant of that. Because
How do you construct it though? Like, from your standpoint in a hospitality part, like for me, when I was looking at it, just because it's something that I've focused on throughout my whole entire life.
Sure.
Even from putting a chair in a certain area, putting lights in a certain area, playing music or having a certain scent or having different things like that. But for me, this is just my perspective. For me, the chicken nugget makers, right? You remember the chicken nugget makers? Yeah. World champions. Basketball team that was a 4th grade team that I coached. On all of those,
pretty sure they beat another really good 4th grade team in the championship. And here's so quick story on that. My son did play for the team that lost in the championship to the chicken nugget makers. Yeah. And one of my proudest dad moments ever was actually between my son and your son. At the end of that game, they both played really hard. The chicken nugget makers won the game pretty handily. Like, it wasn't like it came down to the end, which I think that part helped on that. But my son in the loss, I could tell looking at his face, like he was sad about the loss. The very first thing he did is walk over and congratulate Maddox, shook his hand. I didn't tell him to do it either. Like, I didn't say, go and do this. He congratulated him and complimented him on the trophy. And then Maddox came right back with, you played really great. That was a good game. And it was such a pure and good moment to see that it brought me a ton of joy. And that's in a loss, which, as you know, as you mentioned before, I don't love losses, whether it's kids sports or Xbox or anything else. But like, that really did make me extremely happy as far as like seeing that. And that, so anyone that didn't happen to be at the championship game that knows the vibe Kelly's talking about, where his team came into the game with Kelly with a giant boombox and all the kids dancing and singing, and there was something to it. And when I was coaching football, I may have stolen a little something from the great Kelly Cardenas when, after coaching, we'll tell the quick story about the very first game I ever coached of flag football was a 40-0 loss that was a shellacking in every set of the word when the kids were all in kindergarten. It was my first time coaching. And I had told my wife that I was going to construct the playbook. And she's like, they're in kindergarten. There's no playbook. You just go out there. So I was like, oh, okay. I guess that's right. So I get out on the field. I'm going against a really good coach here in the community, Ole Olson, who great guy and that, but he had his kids were either in kinder or first. they had already played a few seasons and their kids were going in motion and then going deep as far as that. So on the very first play, when they threw like a 10-yard pass, which for kindergartens is basically the equivalent of a 70-yard pass, and I'm just literally on the field in shock. But what I'll never forget is I tried keeping the kids happy and as far as that, but I am truly like dying inside going through there, like picking up kids, trying to move them from one spot to the other. But at the end of the game, when I am feeling utterly and thoroughly defeated and truly a failure, like I have, because I failed pretty significantly, 40-0. And there was an older man that walked out to the field and said, I just want you to know you did an excellent job. And I looked at him like, I honestly thought he was being a jerk, because what I did was a very poor job of coaching. And he said, take a step back and look at the kids. And I did. And all these kindergartners on my team, they were ecstatic. And then one of them, who is a great kid, which hopefully you could see a kid in the neighborhood, like in the area named Rico, who's just a ball of positivity. That's who he is. He comes up to me and he's like, Coach, did we win? And I was like, no, buddy, we didn't win. But then I realized, I was like, because stayed positive and went through there, I didn't feel it, they did. But and this gentleman had said, look at the looks on these kids' faces, like they're all smiling. Like, you couldn't have done a better job than that. And that really spoke to me. But so then the other part, when we had a really rough season, got knocked into the bronze on that, where I had now done, I think, 9 seasons without ever winning a championship. And this was already announced was going to be the final one I did, just because it's a surprising amount of time going through.
Yeah.
And I stole from Kelly Cardenas with the kids singing before the game. And one of the parts I'll never forget is from their semifinal game over to the championship game. These were little 5th graders about to play a 6th grade team, and they were singing meme songs and coming back and forth, and their friends had gathered with them for the walk from one to the other. And I just kind of soaked it in and looked at it, and I was like, no matter what happens in this next game, this is a win, right? Like, this is a win, like, coming through. And then they did wind up getting the win. So that was fun, because they got the big trophy and everything else. But then you realize it is the journey, not the end point. And it's the same thing with the company, like coming back to like, how do you create that vibe, that environment? So in that scenario, it is this. And I see it with the girls in their lacrosse team. It's like when they're out there having fun and challenging and going through, it's so fun to watch and see it and be a part of. But you also see when the vibe is off in any game. So not necessarily a team like that, where the two of us were on the sideline of a game and we saw like things being said and different. And you can see that same thing that happens in youth sports happen in professional sports, and it happens in business, where those teams that truly do come together and become greater than the sum of the parts, if you can create that in a work environment, then you have truly done something. So like, and that is what you're doing with this, with the podcast that you did 276 episodes before this. And then I'm sure you'll have, I can't even count how many episodes after that. And it's, you created a business of just being you. So when you look at what your personal brand is and what that part, then you've done exactly that. So I did go out and hire the best social media manager in the world. So I did land Marcy to handle like setting up my Insta for this. So anyone that does want to follow me, I'll have exactly 1 post on there right now. So you're going to want to get in there and see that content before we go through. So you can get in early, get on the ground floor.
Invest in Microsoft in the 80s.
At Nick Horgan Official. That's my Insta handle, and it's going to be great because I'm going to grab some content from this podcast right here. Last name is Horgan, in case you couldn't spell it. So we have that part there, or maybe Kelly will be kind enough to put the link. So
I'm going to put the link.
And especially when, and you could be there and see the entirety of this
social media
presence.
Like Gold Rush
is one bio headshot of me. but we'll get some reels on there and everything else. And you can say that I was there at the beginning. So it's the part where, like, this is the part when I can't get Kelly on the phone after he's gone all the way big and he's getting paid $500 million a year as far as that on the I'm going to say, I was on the podcast once. Here's the link to it. I kept it. In fact, you'll see it. It's on my Insta. And they'll be like, wait, as far as this, that was the second post. You really do know Kelly Cardenas. That's true.
Oh, Nick, I started the podcast. You know why I started it, and you know Maddox and McKenna. You see them in the neighborhood, and you probably see Maddox more than you see McKenna, because she's 14, and you know I'm trying to be cool. She really is amazing with me though. But little man, you know his personality. I went to put on some shorts this morning, and I was in a dad hurry. If you're a dad, you know what I'm talking about.
I have been in said dad hurry.
And I was in a dad hurry, and I went to put them on, and they were backwards. And I pulled them up, and I laughed with my son. I was like, Maddox, I said, what are you doing, boy? And he said, what are you talking about, Dad? I said, you made me put my shorts on backwards. He's like, well, why are you changing them? And I said, well,
I can hear him saying that.
And I said, what way? And he's like, why are you changing them? You should just wear them that way then. Because one time he tried on some sweats and he walked out and the hole in the knee was on the back of his leg. Yeah. And I was like, Maddox, why you got a hole in the back of your leg? He's like, and then I realized they were on backwards. And I said, go put your pants on backwards. He comes back and the hole's still in the back of the knee. And I said, son, I told you to change your pants around. Why didn't you do that? And he's like, because I liked it. And I said, well, what are you going to say if somebody asks you if you have your pants on backwards? And he's like, well, that's simple. I'll just ask them why they have their pants on forward.
I love that.
You know what I'm saying? And so that type of personality is something that I love and I foster, and I want him to incur being different and maybe getting a little pushback from kids. But I started the podcast because of him and because of McKenna, who is unbelievable. Her personality is phenomenal. I mean, just who she is. But I wanted to take iconic people like yourself that have taken companies from 5 million to 500 million, that have mentors that have sold their companies for 50 million, 100 million, or 50 million, 500 million, and $1 billion. You corrected me because that competitive nature. I know.
No, because you went. Oh,
I know. I went over
100 billion.
I know. I said 100 billion earlier. You should have went with it, Nick. I mean,
there aren't a lot of companies that sold. So as far as looking through, it's like,
it's the one.
Uber?
It's the only one that's ever sold at 100 billion. Let's just call it a trillion.
Well, so then we're talking about it's either Microsoft or Apple on that. It's like, yeah.
So I started the podcast because of Maddox and McKenna, and I wanted to take iconic people like yourself and show them that anything in the world is possible. So what advice would you have for Maddox and McKenna? If you could use both their names, it would be awesome.
I would love to. So Maddox and McKenna, first off, you're so lucky because your parents, Brooklyn and Kelly, are just truly phenomenal people. So on that part, just live a life of gratefulness, because what you already have is what you need, and that's the right support to be behind you and take you through everything you're going to do. And then McKenna, I visited your namesake not long ago, so we were in Hawaii, and Marcy and I did talk about that, and I was like, oh, I wonder if that's it. She's like, McKenna's a common name. It's not because of that. So let's just quickly clarify that. It is. All right.
100%.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And then the other one, I'll say, Maddox, take it down tonight, because I know you've got 2 big games, hopefully, and my son Spencer's on that team. So yes. The advice is put that all out there and stay true to who you are, because that's the part is, and really that's advice for both of them, is once you really know who you are as a person, which I think they'll have a huge head start against most people because it's been fostered, then you can really become who you need to be able to accomplish really whatever's in front of you. So once you have gotten to know yourself, if you can then take that to do truly amazing things, then there's a lot to be said for that. And that's where I've been so fortunate, where I have had so many just phenomenal mentors and people that I've had a part of. So like my parents and what it was instilled with me, and my brother, my sister, and now my wife, like just all these truly amazing people that have allowed me to then take the next steps to get there and get to be the 277th person to be on the best podcast out there. Like that is some pretty exciting stuff right there. So I am so grateful to you, Kelly, for that, and really everything you do and bring to our community and now through the world, through your books and this podcast. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. What about the number one social media manager and most expensive one in the planet, Miss Marcy Horgan? What do you think that she doesn't hear enough from Nick?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, what I hope she hears is just how much I love her, because I do, and really everything she does, not just for our own family, but in general, just like that positive part, just because that is so important. So that's a really good question. So I need to be better at that and just make sure that she knows how appreciated she is really for what she brings to the table and does and that. So on that, I guess I would say that. And what would be your own, Kelly, that
I think in these last couple of months, Brooklyn she's been going. She's been traveling. She comes home. She's a phenomenal mom. She is an incredible friend to me, an incredible wife. So she makes sure that I feel like I'm the man, which a lot of times I'm not, and most of the time I'm not. But she peels back to allow me to be the man because she knows that builds confidence in me, and I see her do that on purpose. And even though she's going with all these things that are happening, she literally, I have no idea how she's able to do it. She stops and she's like, when the kids go to bed, she just pours into me. When the kids are there, she's doing that. And I'm dropping the ball a lot of times. And I think not only that, but she's not voicing all the things that she doesn't like about me. She's only voicing the things that she loves about me.
That's great.
And what it makes me want to do is, number one, ladies, that's the best way to make your man feel horrible about all the horrible things that he's done. Like if he hasn't done the laundry but he did the dishes and you're like, thank you so much for doing the dishes. You don't say anything about the laundry. We will feel bad about not doing the laundry. Worse than if you hound us about the laundry, because then we'll be like, you didn't see what I did at work. And so we'll go into defense mode. But when you compliment us just on the awesome things, then it's like heaping hot burning coals on top of our head.
That's great. Which I also say is just, so if your wife asks you to do something, like you're going to do it. She doesn't have to remind you every 6 months, right?
There we go. That's what I'm saying. We should actually just have a full podcast on how to be great husbands and run our families. You know what I mean? Go. That's because we seem to have all the answers, Nick. Every single
Let's
answer.
ask our wives and see if that truly is the case. I think we may but when we widen the poll, it's possible that the results won't be skewed quite as well. But you are right. Like if we poll, we could then put that on the podcast and just say we polled this.
Yeah, we polled this.
We landed that Kelly and Nick are both great.
Yes,
yes.
There we go. What they say, was it 76% of statistics are made up?
I think it's actually 74% are made up as far as that one.
Well, according to a poll that I just made up right now, it's 85% of them are.
So when we come through there, so that's their final part as we look through, it's like, so I'm extremely fast at math. It's like, well, so give me a problem. It's like, all right, what's 16,000 times 554,000? I don't know, 64. Wait, but that's not even right. I know. I said I was fast. I never said I was good. Like, let's look at that. And that is why we come to, like, as far as the real data, as far as that and telling the story.
Yeah.
So without doing the commercial for it. But that is the part, is like, make it easy for people. And this applies. I'm not talking about my own company.
No, yeah.
But for whatever it is you're doing, if you can make it simple for others to be successful, you're going to wind up finding success yourself.
It's amazing that you say that, because, listening to this and having this conversation is so enlightening, because it's a microcosm of who you are, because you told me this concept of, like, doing the right things, focusing on the people, building relationships, all this stuff. And then you tell me all the stories, and every one of them is laced with that part of it. And I kept trying to listen to hear, like, okay, well, but there was this secret silver bullet that Nick has, and I'm trying to grab the silver bullet. That's where my mind was. But every time it was like, you told me the story, and then I was like, damn, like, he said it again. He didn't say it, but those exact words, but it embodied it in it. And to realize that part, you make things simple, Nick. Like, you make things simple and consumable, although you work in a very complex industry, you work with very complex, high numbers, all the stuff. It's so encouraging to hear that at the end of the day, if you can connect with the people and you can make sure that they feel amazing and you can deliver a product that is going to make them feel amazing, everything works out.
Which I have found that to be exactly the case. And this does go back to my dad, and it was something that I do remember and was instilled really early, is making other people feel good. Like, there is something to it. So he had something he was doing at work where he actually had written down, which I certainly never did this, but he would give a compliment every single day, and he had a list. And I still remember he told us he did this, and we all thought it was like a little bit crazy. But then I was like, you know what, that is positive, because he's putting positivity out there. He also took notes in the closet, like my parents' bedroom, like he wrote stuff on the wall. So like we saw like Nick getting married, like this, and like just different things. Like, so things he was taking, and that may have been like, as he was starting to forget, he put more things in there so he'd remember. But he was doing this even when we were little. Like he put like, and some of it would be just like what the weather was like today. So he would write little things. But so like that complimenting people, like that was something he did. But I still remember my sister had one of the like best gotchas ever, because we're at the dinner table and we had talked. We all knew my dad did this with like the compliments as far as that, and like had like the day of the week where he'd kind of roll through to make sure he's being positive to everyone. And he said something really nice to me about me, like at that, like, and I truly can't remember what it was, like something, but it really was a really nice statement. And without missing a beat, my sister looked over and she's like, yeah, well, maybe it's just your day. Like, which if people didn't know the first part, it's kind of a funny statement of maybe it's your day, like you're having a great day. But no, she was saying, like, your name just showed up on the checklist. It's like, oh, hey, Kelly, your hair looks great today. Like,
But it's amazing in that, because even if you knew it was just your day and a person said something positive about you, it still impacts you. It still works.
As long as here's the key on that, as long as it is sincere.
Yes.
So that is the part. And with me, it is. Like, when I come and I say those things about you, they're all true. I do not do this to someone I don't respect or have like the thoughts for. The insincere, I don't do it in any way, shape, or form. I also do not believe in like the adage, show respect to every person. I don't respect everyone. So, and if I don't respect you, I don't pretend that I do. Like, I can't help that. Like, as far as who I am, like I will be polite to everyone, and I will be respectful toward everyone. But if someone doesn't act in a way that they deserve respect, then I don't believe in respecting that person. So that part where it is sincere, and that, like, the way I think of you and what you've done and who you are as a person, which Marcy and I talked about this with you specifically as the example of embodying like that. So it's like, because a lot of times you'll see it like the football fields or the lacrosse fields. It's like, be this, act the champion, go through there. Like, you really are saying, like, say the positive things about each person, like build him up, build her up, like do those things. Like, and it is the right way to be and go through there. So you embody it. So I love that. But if you didn't do that, like, I wouldn't be sitting here on the podcast, and I would have waited more than just the 3 years as far as getting on.
It would have taken us like 10 years. Nick, will you please? Well, when I was talking about the chicken nugget makers, it's wild, because it's just one little thing that we did with the chicken nugget makers. We did with the with our football team, the football teams that I've got a chance to do. Actually, it's funny because Maddox plays 2.
Yeah.
And we do it on one and don't do it on the other.
And you see the difference, yeah.
And it's just, and what this component is, and but we also did it to build a multi-million-dollar company. And all it was we call it Speaking Life. So it's specific, use the kid's name or the person's name in your company, specific. And you use their name, you look them in the eyes, and you tell them something specific that they did that impacted you in a positive way.
Yeah.
This changes the vibe. Because, and it does it in a positive and a negative way, which on the positive way, when you go around the circle and you do it, when you say the person's name, Nick, you did X, that Nick lights up.
Yeah.
But then when Susie's sitting next to Nick and 10 people went and they didn't say anything about Susie, Susie's like, I'm going to do something good next week to be able to make that happen. It's amazing how simple those things are. And I keep hearing my pops, because my pops would be like, boy, there's only one business in the world and one business only. And that's the people business. You take the people out of the business, then you have no business at all. And I'll be like, yeah, whatever, Pop. But now I sit with you at the top of your industry, flying at some of the highest levels in business. You said the exact same thing.
Yeah. And my dad, very similarly, and my mom, like, what they instilled is that, like, that part. So it's, and I look back, so that final funny story, and then I don't know as far as on time, where I do think when I look back on my dad, where, and I think I've told you this story before, but the wider, I have not ever told this story like publicly in an environment like this, where my dad was very big on, like, we owned a woods. We didn't grow up wealthy, but there was a woods behind our house that was ours, and it was, all the kids in the neighborhood were welcome there. And I had a motorcycle as a kid, which my mom did not love, but my brother and I delivered newspapers for, I think, 3 years to earn the money to buy it. And what he's, because we asked for a motorcycle when we were little, and he's like, earn money, then you can buy whatever you want. Like, that was the adage. So we worked, delivered newspapers, 3 years, 3.5 years. We got $500 to go and buy a little Honda XR80 that we used to ride back there, and we had so much fun. But there was a crotchety neighbor on the other side of the creek that was there that used to complain all the time, and he would call the police on us while we're in our backyard riding. And so, like, the police would come, and then my brother was older, so he would be the one that would talk to them, and they would say, and then they stopped coming, because afterwards they were like, there was a noise complaint. Who owns this land right here? And my brother would say, we do. And they'd say, which house is yours? He'd point. It's like right there up the hill. So, like, then they would just say, do whatever you want, have fun, kids. So then the crotchety neighbor went and got a no trespassing sign and added it to our fence, like put a big sign on the fence that we owned on the property, and it said, no trespassing, like huge letters. So we told my dad this, like, he did it so they could kind of like call again and say, there's kids down there, you're not supposed to be in there. So my dad goes out and doesn't tell us, but he has a huge sign made, bigger than the one that was down there. And it says in big letters, private property. And then right below that, it says, trespassers welcome. So, like, where he's just putting there, and his point and what he said was, this is for, like, the kids here, like, to go, and didn't say get in trouble, like that, like ride the motorcycles, build the jumps. Like, he tried to flood it for us so we could have an ice rink, which never really worked, but, like, the thought was there, like, because there's, like, pieces of grass coming up through, like, as far as, and in your mind, like, it's going to be like an NHL arena that's down there, and we're going to be skating with the hockey nets and playing, but then, like, it gets done, and there's still, like, snow and a stump that comes up through part of it, and, like, but you know what? Some of the most fun times ever were down there and, like, playing in the creek and the land. But that was the part where my dad was like, this is the community, this is part of it. And so that was instilled in me. And I guess that wraps back to, like, even as a kid, like, for the neighbors, it's not just yours, it's everyone's. Like, how do we make this better? So I've had so many people tell me this challenge they've got to when they're helping other people. Like, you hear the old adage that is, if you help everyone to get what they want, you never have to focus on what you want. I have had people get to a breaking point, though, and say, I'm helping all these people, and all these people are doing really, really well, but I'm struggling. What do you say to that person? I mean, I guess figure out what it is you are bringing to the table or can bring to the table that is something that people will want to pay for. So, like, as far as that part where, so, like, with you, like, you're creating the perfect environment. So if I'm looking at this on that, where every kid wants to be a YouTuber, right? And now you have this amazingly cool studio. So the creative loft here, like, so I guess if I'm talking specifically to you, like the advice would be create not the just you are creating the really successful podcast business. So like there's something like that. But interestingly, the business that potentially could be massively larger is how do you make other people successfully do what it is you're doing and create their personal brand and their podcast and their YouTube channel and their Instagram and everything else, because so many that want to do that. And if you look at the people that got rich during the gold rush, it was not the people that panned for gold and found some. It was the ones that were selling the pickaxes and the shovels and the like restaurants and the inns and the other establishments that were created. Like that's the people that built the wealth. So like on this, where the market that we're going into is, how do you profit on that? And when you look at AI, for instance, it's like, who are the companies that are going to really benefit? Well, NVIDIA and like that, the ones that power kind of the behind the scenes in that. So it's just thinking about things in that way.
Yeah.
Like it's in kind of an asymmetrical way to think about, like as far as that, where you already have this super successful business that you've created and this really powerful brand and your books, but how do you then take this and create it into something more, which you've done already with the Hideout and what you're doing and bringing people together and helping them to truly understand. But like, what are the other pieces? And I think you already are doing this to some degree, but how can you then create it into a business that scales? Because that's the part where the leverage and the scale, if you think about how like real crazy wealth it's created, it is how do you take what you've done and then bring it to a much wider group or audience and help others to also do something similar.
Well, it makes sense. And it's funny because I just had a friend, we were speaking yesterday, and he asked me that question. And most of the time, and it's amazing because you answered it in that way, is a lot of times is checking the motive of why you're helping the people, right? Because I've had people that get to maybe let's call it a marathon, 26.2 miles. I remember the 0.2 because I did one. Yeah. And the 0.2
is hard.
Oh, it's the hardest. But 10 miles in, if you're like, okay, I already ran, can I just call it a marathon? It ain't. 13 ain't a marathon.
Yeah.
18 ain't a marathon. 26.1 ain't a marathon. And I find that a lot of times people will get into it with a motive of like, they're here, Nick, and if you're out there listening, they're here, Nick, and be like, oh, wow, yeah, relationships, cool. I'm going to go make them, but I'm going to make them with the right people, so then they're going to pay me off in the future. I've just watched people like that get to a point, and then they don't have any steam left. Then they get frustrated. Whereas when their motive, like with you're looking long game, and you're like, no, I'm not giving you something so I could get something.
I'm not even looking. It doesn't even cross my mind. Like that part is true. Like it is. And interestingly, there have been a lot of times where those people have really helped me, but I don't even think about it, and I don't keep score and look at like this. It is. And that is, to me, I think, a real key is who can you help and go through there? And then you're not going to run out of steam because you're not looking for like the transactional, because those are the relationships. Like there's always going to be a winner and a loser. If you're doing that and keeping score, that it's like, oh, you know what? You did this, so I need to do that. Or because you brought me crumble cookies, I need to bring you that, where there's no part of. And actually I did so before I took the job with Amaze Insights, I did some sales training with a team. It was a high-powered CEO and his co-founder, really, really smart guys, and they're scaling a company that's successful, but they're ready to make the jump to the next level. And I just wanted to welcome them because they flew into Carlsbad from far away to meet with me. So I was like, you know what? I want them to feel special. I didn't know enough about them to know like the personal things that they would like. Otherwise I would have been really specific. So I did a couple gift bags and I went super wide, but not like expensive, crazy stuff like Coke and Diet Coke and M&Ms and Snickers, like most of it was relatively unhealthy because I think I put too much of myself in it. And then I meet them and they're both like, I'll have the faux mung bean salad and this. So I did miss the mark on that, but they were saying to each other when they checked into their hotel and the hotel called them down and they're like, wait, what is this? Because they weren't expecting. And that's what they said. They looked at each other and they're like, I think the training has begun. Like, but it wasn't part of the sales training. And I was not doing it for any reason other than I wanted to welcome them to our city and do that. And then I did bring like cookies to the meeting and went through there. And it was like, but I didn't do it with intent, if that makes sense. Like I just did it because I wanted them to get a lot out of it. And then I also wanted to just make sure that the right mindset, so as you would say, the vibe was there for the meeting because I wanted to get the most out of this sales training. So I wanted them to have a positive feeling and impact before they even got in the room, to sit down and go through there. And that's also what I want. Like I want to walk into a room and have people that are genuinely happy on that, like as happy as our new puppy is, like when you walk in, where it's like, this is a celebration, like everything is. So if we can have that mindset to be genuinely happy when you go through there, it's infectious. The positive attitude, you see it, how you can help bring things together. And the same thing does happen with negative people and energy vampires, where you will feel like you walk into the room and it's like, oh, this is going to be tough. And like, you can be drained like that, where it's like, let me tell you all the things that are wrong. And like, and I do still want to love everyone and go through there. But if there is someone that every time you see that person, you then are like drained and you're feeling your lifeblood's out of you, then maybe try and be in some different rooms. Right. So I guess that part, and try and be as positive as you can, which you already naturally embody. So I guess you don't have to worry about that.
Thank you. Well, Gino, I got to give a shout out to Gino because one of his favorite quotes was, don't let the smooth taste fool you. And I think that it's cool with you. You embody that, where my pops would say it. And he said, don't let the smooth taste fool you. Just because I got a smile on my face doesn't mean that I didn't get kicked in the head. You know what I mean? And to see the highs, the lows, and when you were talking about like the deals that you're, whether you're mentoring somebody and they're dealing with they think the deal is done and you're like, no, you're in the fourth inning, bro. Yeah. You know what I mean? So calm it down. Let's settle in. I think that part is so phenomenal, so inspirational for me watching you. Because it's not that all the perfect things are happening. It's that you're bringing the perfect attitude and vibe into the whatever scenario you have. And when I say it's the perfect one, it just means that you're saying that I can learn a lesson here or I could have a victory here, but neither one is going to define me.
Yeah. And that is true. Like as far as that, where on this, and that's, I think once you allow yourself that ability to fail, then you can truly succeed. So as far as that, where, because it's and there are some people I'm coaching right now and trying to help go through, and the confidence as far as I'm not going to do that because I don't know if I'm the right fit. And I'm like, but then no one is, because if you can't do it, who can? So like the job, and if it's like, because it says this on the sheet, so walk in and change the narrative and be like, I know it said you needed this, but what you really need are the things I can actually do. Like take that to the table and turn it around. And that's not to say don't go into something that you're wholly unqualified to do, but like believe in yourself.
Yeah.
Because why shouldn't you?
Nick, you're absolutely phenomenal, man. I appreciate you. I'm going to ask, though, that we don't go 3 years in between having you on the podcast again. It has been an absolute pleasure. And again, to see the consistency, man, and to hear the stories, but see the common thread all the way through, that you serve people at a high level, and you continue to do the right things. And there's no wonder why your son, Spencer, came up at the end of the game to shake Maddox's hand and congratulate him, because of the parents that you and Marcy are. And that's such a highlight. It's such an amazing, amazing thing. And I want to congratulate you on that, man.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate that. And I really have enjoyed this time today. And so I'll get it on the books for 2.5 years from now for sure. So no, if I could, I'd be on here every week, because there's nothing more fun than sitting down with the famous Kelly Cardenas. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. Marcy, we love you. We love you to death. Right now is the time where you check out all the sponsors. You make sure that you patronize all of them. Also, too, we want to thank every one of you guys for rocking with us. And they told us, Nick, this. They told us when we, or they, it's funny because my wife is like, who's they? I'm like, it's vague.
You know who they are.
But they told me that you have to do a 45-minute podcast. Or you could do a 20-minute one. And you have to do that. And I said, I want to have a conversation with someone. And it doesn't have a time frame on it. It has the fact of where the conversation goes and how it's connected. And even when we talked, and I want to thank you for this, because you were like, how can I get prepared for it? I said, come with your attitude, like come with who you are as Nick. And you showed that. And in this time, I want to thank all the people that listen to us and that have spent the time with us, because this really has been this podcast has been something that has been transformative, not only for myself, but you can imagine having a record of 277 people that are the most iconic people in the world that my kids are getting advice from. Well, not advice, they're getting counsel from, because they're all people who have done it.
Sure.
And so I want to thank all of you out there. And Nick, I want to thank you again. And you're officially off the hot seat.